I mix what I like, what I like.
I mix what I like is exactly where you want and need to be. I mix what I like organic, vegan, soul food from your immediate diet. Get healthy.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
Hey, what's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like, aka the Football Roundtable. What's up, fellas? How you all feeling today? I'm Jared Ball, happy to be here. We all got the full roundtable. Robert, Mutanda, Daniel, all there. Contact and information is in the show description. Please check it out. And forgive me, Mutanda, I couldn't help it with the little troll video.
Oh no, I'm with it. I thought that was funny. How you doing, everyone?
You're gonna get that UEFA strike already?
I mean, we're already in the demonetized wilderness right now, so why not go for it? So by the way, folks, support our Patreon show. The link is in the show description if you would. But yeah. What's going on? How you all doing?
I'm well.
Enjoying Copa America, the Euros. What's up, remixers in the chat?
Yeah, we're doing it. We're doing it.
All right. Well, you all right? What's going on? I came in here with the jokes and the troll video and everything, and nobody. What's the matter?
I think everybody got taken aback by that cold introduction. I know Mutanda's like, who knows what Mutanda's thinking, but Mutanda's like,
he's thinking I'm gonna get him. That's what he's thinking.
I don't know,
It was just a little, I couldn't help it. I just Googled, Holland bloopers and threw a little video on it,
You had your pick,
It's really a shame.
I just couldn't help it.
It's really a shame that he's not in the Euros. He's not going to be in the World Cup, So you can't really get an impression of him outside the EPL, which is not cool, It'd be nice to get a better impression.
I'm glad you brought that up. And somewhat all jokes aside, one thought I did have to that end was is the best that he can expect at the international level a career like Lewandowski, like a Poland, where you make it into some of these tournaments every once in a while, but you're not really ever going to be a serious competitor. And then however you're considered for the ages will have to be built in league play with
theoretically
play.
I think Norway could get to like a Euro semi or quarterfinal, or did Norway? I hope I said Norway, because they do have an incredible goal scoring freak in Holland and one of the better midfield creators in Odegaard, and we don't know exactly what Højlund's going to be, the Manchester United striker, but they could have like a scary, top, but it's going to be their goalkeeper, their defense. I can't recall any Norway players off the top of my head, but like when you have Odegaard and Haaland, you should be able to do something within your continental tournament, which is why it's pretty sad that they're not at this Euros, but eventually they'll get into a major tournament, especially as they start to grow, because I can't see Europe maintaining this 24 team thing. They're going to expand to 32 eventually, so But I think Lewandowski might be a good comp. In that,
all right,
yeah.
Well, Lentz is the Man United striker is Danish. He's not Norwegian.
Højlund?
I don't know.
I thought he was from Norway.
Lentz is.
I thought Holland was from Norway too.
No, yeah, Højlund's Danish.
Okay, all right. Well,
so it just got a little worse for.
I'm confused. Wait a minute. Who's Danish?
Højlund.
Hoyland.
Erasmus.
That guy.
Right.
I thought he was from Norway, but
So we're not talking about the Man City striker.
No, we're currently
but-
talking about the Man United striker who Daniel mistook as a national comrade.
add this to
for
my
the Man
blooper reel
City.
that you can play at the beginning of the next.
Start that next time, yeah.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, so look, okay, so forgive me everybody for the cold opening. You know, we can reset. Welcome everybody back to another round of football talk. I'm Jared Ball. Mutanda, Daniel, Robert have all joined us for another. What I'm excited for. I always look forward to these discussions, and there's been a lot happening. And I used it. I don't know if we want to start there, but I used it as the thumbnail, the inspiration from the latest contribution from Danish fans whose team has advanced to the round of 16, so we get more opportunity to see from them, and who have been defended by in a way by a legend and a semi-big name from the country in Nathan Ake, and then Ruud Gullit sort of defended that. And they're supposedly, for those who don't know, pretending to be
Ruud Gullit.
They're claiming to be Ruud Gullit, the legendary Dutch midfielder, right? Or was he a center forward? What
Midfielder,
exactly?
midfielder and secondary striker kind of player.
All right,
And
so I'll
it's
just pull
Gullit,
his picture.
I think, not
It's
Gullit,
Gullit?
but
What did I say?
Gullit.
Oh, because I pronounced the G and it's not. I'm sorry, my bad. My
I
apologies.
think
But this is,
think it's Gullit, but who cares?
so this is him here. And then you see here Nathan Ake, who is a current Man City player with a similar background and hairstyle. But this is, and so that, I thought, I mean, well, I'll say it today as we watched the Ukraine Belgium game, and where they praised in the stands a neo-Nazi. I was watching with my daughters and was saying, every time we do, well, there's always some discussion of something like this, and I started making comments about, semi-jokingly about, if you haven't engaged in enough slavery and colonialism, you're not going to win. And I was asking, when is the last fully white or ethnically European team coming out of Europe that won a major tournament? And I was guessing probably a German team, because they seem to have like the fewest.
Greece,
although that's changing too. But Greece doesn't really win much. I'm talking about
No. I'm saying in 2004, Greece won the Euros, so that might be the answer to your question.
Okay, all right.
Or
so
hold on. What do you
that's why I was
consider
saying-
Spain? Is the question. What do you consider Spanish people ethnically? Are they ethnically European, or are we going into like pre-1492 and the whole Moorish conquest?
Point. I didn't really think of it that way. I would have given their current construct. I would give them credit. So yeah, if they didn't have, what was it, more recently they had one of those super teams that didn't seem to have as many directly African descended folks on the team. But in general, I was just raising that question. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know.
Well, 2010 was that year, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
They won. Yeah, 2010 was that. I think they had it was pretty obvious they didn't have any real Moorish presence on the field.
I mean,
so that's, so in other words, that just quickly, that's what I was saying to my girls was why Ukraine wasn't going to do anything and why they were exiting the tournament. They just didn't have the same legacy of slavery, despite their leanings towards neo-Nazism. They just didn't have enough of the legacy to build up their roster. Whereas Belgium has Lukaku and Doku and a number of other cats on there, and and I was like, they're obviously,
Okay.
So anyway, but by all those jokes aside, there is this ongoing problem, and then you all sent the photo we'll get to later of the white nationalists on Twitter lamenting how black the Canadian national team has gotten. So all those, which is one of my favorite. Then
Can I add something?
Twitter.
Can I add one thing?
That was it.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah, that was it.
So just quickly on the Ukraine piece.
Mm-hmm.
So you said they don't have the history of like colonialization, imperialism.
Again, these are oversimplistic, silly, semi
but what
jokes.
they do have is a history of like brain drain. So they are a tool of that. So if you look at a lot of Ukrainian universities, there's many Nigerians, Ghanaians, a lot of African people that go to university in Ukraine. When the war kicked off, there was a story about
I'm just showing
so I mean this gets into stereotypes about Nigerians and how they move about the world. But there was a story that they have like refugee or orphanages. They have orphanages because there are Nigerian students, male students, that go to Ukraine, meet Ukrainian women, then leave the country and leave, mixed race Africans in these with Ukrainian mothers. Because of the racism in Ukraine, the children in some cases are abandoned and they're left in these orphanages. If Ukraine felt like, adopting and accepting these, mixed race Africans, if you will, into their country at large, perhaps you would get, like what Germany have with like Adeyemi or Musiala with Germany, Nigerian father, German mother. They could do that. So
Sane,
yeah. So like they're not incapable. It's just they have to be willing. But I remember reading the story like, damn. So there was in this one story, there was like a whole house full of people that look like myself and Jared, but with this one old white lady who like takes us in like stray cats because nobody wants you. So it was just mad sad,
Yeah, I think I've seen. Yeah. That's funny.
But Jared, what we got to do too, you've also got to take into account Croatia. Because Croatia hasn't had, to the best of my recollection, this is 2024. I mean, at least in the past 10 years, I don't think they've had even a colorable presence on the field of somebody from, and let's face it, there's something interesting going on in those former Yugoslavian countries because for some reason, they produce a disproportionate amount of very talented athletes. Now, whether Croatia would be, obviously it would be stronger if it was still a Yugoslavia. But you got to wonder. I mean, there's a lot of talent coming out of there. And so, I'm just throwing that out there. It's like...
You would call them the Uruguay of Europe in terms of population, but then relative to like what they're able to accomplish on the international stage is pretty impressive.
No question. Yeah, I mean, in 2014, is it pronounced Herzegovina and Bosnia, which is one of the remnants of Yugoslavia? I mean, they have like a population of 4 million, and they qualified for the World Cup in 2014.
I think Croatia might be at 3 or 4. It's like
it's a small country, but they have they produce a lot of friggin' talent. Not to mention Serbia and all the rest of those former Yugoslavian countries.
If only we could all get along, right?
Yeah, I tell you.
But like the more interesting Balkan the more interesting Balkan combination is like their basketball team. If you got Doncic, Jokic, all the itches on one team, that's a team that could potentially beat the United States in basketball in like an Olympics.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened before the war. Yugoslavia was. There's actually a documentary on, I think it's HBO. or maybe it's ESPN. There's a documentary about
Once Brothers.
Once Brothers, exactly.
Amazing documentary.
The guy that died in the car accident.
Petrovic, yeah.
Who was a player.
Drazen.
He was a serious player.
He was cold.
He was
He was a
he was a
cold-blooded-
problem. He was a problem.
Cold-blooded.
Yeah, no, he
dude.
was nasty. He was nasty.
Cold-blooded.
And in fact, it's interesting on my new favorite inappropriate sports show, Cam and Mace. Cam just talked about him this morning and said and reminded he was not just a shooter. He had handles. He could take you to the rack. And apparently there's a game that I don't really remember that way, and I was watching a lot back then. But apparently there's a game where he was a problem for Jordan. And dominated Jordan.
He put like 40 something on
allegedly.
If you haven't seen Once Brothers, watch it because it's about him and Vlade Divac.
No, I did watch it. I just might have just put that out of my mind. That's
all.
So
they were friends, and then Civil War kicks off, and they had to go their separate ways. But but anyway, sorry to cut you, Robert.
No, I think that's the. There are always exceptions to the rule. It's crazy. The rest of Europe, you could even argue that Italians are not white. That's the whole thing with the Iberian Peninsula and the Italian Peninsula and the proximity to Africa and the whole 9 yards. There's
that was kind of my point about Spain. Like how deep do we want to go into the ethnic rabbit hole?
Yeah, if you go deep, the culture. I haven't been on the ground and walked the streets of Madrid or Barcelona, but I have walked the streets of Sevilla, which is much more south, and Sevilla was. You can see it in the architecture. The Moorish architecture is it's stunning, It's stunning, man. They had a culture there that was the best of any culture that's ever been created.
Wow.
Absolutely. They were the leading cultural vanguard on the planet for that period of time. Setting aside China, because China's, in another part of the world. There was obviously some things going on in India, maybe even Africa too, but but in terms of that peninsula.
I can't help it.
No. I was thinking
maybe we're in Africa.
I was thinking Kemet. Are we not giving Kemet no credit? Like, come on.
Kemet gets no. Kemet get look. There's the stuff in look. There were civilizations that I even saw the remnants of in Zimbabwe that were impressive. There's of course Songhai. There's so much. So that's why when I hear best ever of all time, I'm like,
I'm talking about for that period of time, which is
certainly for Europe,
for
600
to 1300, basically 800 years.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
They had control of that peninsula and northern Africa and part of the Middle East.
No, I've always liked the basic summary Dr. Clark used to give, and as a reminder that European civilization did not start top down. It started bottom up, so to speak, from the regions closest to the continent of Africa and Asia. So it's not a coincidence that none of this started in Scandinavia. No disrespect to our most northern European relatives and cousins, etc.
Okay, so on the blackface thing, so you put up the pictures of the Dutch fans and Ruud Gullit and Nathan Ake. Gullit, I believe his people are from Suriname. So, and Ake's people, I think, are from Ivory Coast. He used to be a Chelsea youth player, so somebody can check me on that one. I've already been wrong once today, so we'll try to avoid errors. But I think his people are from Ivory Coast. Do you guys know about? Of course you do. I'm preaching to the choir. Zwarte Piet. You guys know about this?
Yep, I was gonna because I saw it.
So let's have a conversation about Zwarte Piet.
I saw that in myself. Am
I pronouncing that right, Matanda?
Yeah, it's slightly off, but yeah, I might be butchering.
Help me out.
Zwarte Piet. It's like but go on.
Black Pete. Yeah. So apparently
Black
this is
Pete.
So this is Santa's helper who comes down the chimney, and all of his hair features and skin, they somehow become African. So then Dutch people dress up in blackface effectively during Christmas. So Dutch people would say that them doing blackface, and I'm not to speak for all Dutch people, but culturally this is what it suggests. That blackface is done in it's honorific. It's like we do this because we like you, or we do blackface because it's like it's just what we do here kind of vibe. So it makes sense that if one of your biggest cultural symbols is kind of a gateway into blackface, that the football team
comes naturally,
that the prominent Africans in your society, the footballers, will get the same treatment as one of your cultural symbols. I'm sure when you type that in, some of those articles were African people in the Netherlands actually protesting, like, why are y'all doing this? So it's one feeding the other. So a lot of the people, even I think Ake said something to the effect of they're doing it because they like us, so it's not really a problem.
Yeah.
So it's maybe some people watching this would think Nathan Ake was speaking against it. No. Ake was like, we need to stop being so sensitive. That was his thing.
Yeah.
So again, mixed race Africans letting us down.
So I've had the pleasure. Shout out to Baruch Gottlieb and the crew over there at West Den Haag. I've been invited over there a couple times recently, and we saw all of that. And they sell the dolls everywhere, the T-shirts everywhere. This is not like some. They are, it is as overt as I was just showing in those pictures. They are not ashamed. They are very proud of this tradition. And I did meet with Africans in the community who were against it and organizing and protesting it, and they're just ignored. I mean, that's basically what it is. It's not that much different than a lot of the protests we see around here, where people will pay some polite attention, and then it's like, all right, but it's back to business as usual. This is our norm. So yeah, so it is disappointing that Nathan and Rude, because I thought I saw his comments being similar. And that it's unfortunate that even if they want to show sympathy to their countrymen or country folk, that they would show some sensitivity to the history and be aware, at least, that many African people, black folks over there, are not happy with this, and that they could maybe say, look, we could make some adjustments if they don't even want to come out just as hard. But as I was joking with you all and everybody else, the Dutch, first to slavery, last to give up blackface. This is
also like, and what hasn't, I think, been reported on as much is Ake gave the comments basically saying, I wish we would kind of let things like stop being so sensitive effectively. And then because whenever they do interviews, it's a player plus the coach. So Ake was the player representative. Then they asked the coach the same player, and he was basically he effectively said ditto, like what Nathan said. So like Ronald Koeman was allowed to use Ake as like a shield to basically get off his point that he doesn't have a problem with it anyway. So it's not just Ake saying it, but it's what that allows nefarious actors to then use him for. So again, you don't go to footballers necessarily unless they're properly positioned, politicized, educated to speak for all the people. But, that's kind of what happens when you throw it in front of a footballer's face. He's going to say something stupid, maybe. Unless it's Mutanda.
Which, of course, Exactly, but they didn't ask Mutanda. But we should, who's been conspicuously silent for the most part. What's up, man?
No, what's good, man? People. I'm not gonna lie. I'm tired. It's just great to see y'all. It's been a minute. I've been. Apologies. I'm not checked out at all. Admittedly, I was late to do my research. I had it all. I had it all, but I hadn't written it down, ready for today, because I'm here for the violence that'll come later when we get into Brazil. I'm here for all that. I brought you guys saw the Mourinho football heritage speech. I'm not gonna do an exact replica, but I have my own version. But no,
This is
Oh,
football
man.
heritage.
Football heritage. No, but it's seriously, it's great to see all the people who are joining us. Like this show is awesome, man. It's therapy in a lot of ways because obviously our passions just combine here. With the Spot the Beat, look, I have I told y'all that maybe I'll little personal history. I'm very close to this in a way because I played for Dutch coaches and with Dutch teammates when I lived in Canada. And not to name drop or anything, but this is just kind of wild. The coach who signed me at FC Edmonton is actually the Dutch assistant coach currently. He's on the, so it's kind of crazy to see.
Well,
him.
that's Wikipedia-able. Well, you might as well name drop it.
But it's kind of wild to see him. And so that's just, I don't know. That's just kind of cool. Like, oh, that's Dwight. I doubt he remembers me. This was a long time ago. The Dutch are insane, right? The Dutch are insane. And the reason they're insane is because, if anybody watched Ted Lasso, right? That Dutch character that they had on there that was they did of course it was whitewashed, but there's a great deal of truth to it, right? Whereas like that Dutch character, for people who don't remember, he was like very like brutally honest with his teammates in the show, to the point where like he made them uncomfortable, because he would say things that was like, yo, my man, what are you talking about? Like he was like, I think after a game, just for an example, they were in the locker room and it was like, oh, consoling a player who maybe didn't play that great. And then he was like, no, actually, you were shit. You didn't play well. And then they're all like, wait, why are you saying that? And then somebody was like, oh, no, that's just, he's Dutch. He's just brutally honest. That's just how he is. And this is something that they like use, like they skate with, like, oh, no, we're not. I think I put in our chat, right? It's not that we're every bit the imperialist assholes as our, much stronger German neighbors. We're just very honest, and we're very this, and we're just Dutch. But the whole Sparta Pete stuff is it's complete BS. What Nathan Ake said is just, I mean, it's the most milquetoast like comfort thing that you could say to that. I mean, there's so many, because here's the thing, is like, if you want to say, and even myself, on the one hand, not that I went down this rabbit hole, but on the one hand, I can understand a football fan, right? Like a little child who maybe doesn't understand the history of the world, who looks at old Dutch teams and is like, oh, I really love that player, and they want to get the braids and all that. But when you add the history of just blackface in Holland, like you all have mentioned, and you add everything that the Dutch have done, currently do, in regards to their geopolitics, there's no way to excuse it. So the Dutch are insane. I've experienced it firsthand. And I don't know what else you gotta say.
I would like, Jared, you will know the name of this person who was, I think he was a professor at Cornell. I can't remember his name right now. I think his last name was Bernays. And he wrote a series of very controversial books about the impact of Africa on Greece. You remember that? Remember who his name? What is his name?
No. So it's not. Yeah. No, it's not Bernays. You're thinking of. Oh wow! And I even met him once. I saw him lecture, and I have his book, Black Athena.
Black Athena. Exactly.
Bernal. Our chat is undefeated.
Exactly.
Our chat is undefeated. And so he was an interesting. He was as close to. I don't know enough about his off the record politics to call him an ally entirely, but in that regard of defending the African foundation of Greek civilization, he was certainly an ally. And
the reason I'm bringing that up in the context of this thing with the Netherlands and this blackface thing is that, and this is pure theory, right? But when you think about the advent of capitalism, which, arguably is 14th, 15th century from a European perspective, because it's pretty clear that there has been some amazing, incredibly thorough historical erasure going on about European history. and that it's very likely that the impact of an African presence in Europe after 1400, 1500 became subject to a whitewashing process, and that we basically lost a tremendous amount of history about, that part of the world and African influence generally. So that now what we've got is a distorted, picture of history that is largely disseminated by the colonialist global machine. And so that's how these people react. I mean, obviously we're in a privileged position, we read more books than our kid does, that's for sure. But it's a shame. I mean, it's just, people just don't know history, it's just, and it's global. It's a global problem. People don't know history. It's incredible. So, whatever.
No, absolutely. And man, yeah, sorry, I just was going down a memory lane. Bernal put up with a lot of garbage for that too. He took a lot for trying to remind people.
Well, he was used to it though, because I think his dad was a communist. And
now that that I don't know. Yeah, that part I don't know.
Is
this the white dude that was with Dr. Clark when he said, "I don't debate all others I teach," whatever the quote is. I only debate my equals, all others I teach.
It was
the hardest bar of all time. I think it was the white dude that was there with him. He was like his co-debate person.
Yeah, they were on the same side against Mary Lefkowitz, and Guy Rogers was the other person. And
Jared, is your button working? That's bars. Is that?
Oh, it is. But it is. My bad. But
it's not my bar.
Now listen.
It's Dr. Clark's bar.
It's there, but it is. It is. But and yeah. So it's a classic debate. I've listened to it or watched it. I can't even more than I've watched The Godfather, which is just crazy. That's a lot. Just for a point of reference. Anyway. But yeah, so
how good is The Godfather really? Joking.
The Godfather's parts 1 and 2, and I just rewatched them because I made sure, if I do nothing else, my children will watch those films. So I made sure that my oldest, before I was like, you can't go to college without watching these movies. So I'll get to my youngest in probably next year to make her watch the first. I think honestly, and I'm not even my racial pride is contradicted here. Because of how much I just like that movie, and to contradict even the trajectory we're going in here around the appreciating African contributions to world civilization. Because this film, to me, which other than some indirect wild racism,
it's it's slightly useful at the end where they tell you like we're not going to sell the drugs in these areas, we're going to sell them in those areas. So it's useful.
But the only black character you see and hear on camera is the brother that Tony, who is named as the one holding the horse. I think his name. Yeah, thanks Tony, the one holding the horse for that who will eventually lose its head. But honestly, I think those films are as good as we could expect to ever see from a commercial media construct in this country. I watched them again. I think they're fantastic. The storytelling, the acting, the foreshadowing, the thought, the subtlety. I mean, to me, that they're near perfect films for me, for my kind of. My daughter, of course, thought they were a little slow. But
she would not be wrong.
No, she would be. It's just that she's been raised on, lesser quality films.
Yeah,
so
it's another generation, that's for sure. Yeah, I think you're right, man. I think Jared's right, man. I think the first 2 Godfather movies were just classics, And the third one, I was so disappointed in the third one. I was just like.
If the third one didn't star his daughter, who was just not meant to be in front of camera, I think she's maybe pretty good behind the camera. I don't know. She's just not meant to be. She's just not an on-screen actress, and I think that wasn't for her.
Two-footed.
If you replace her, pay Robert Duvall the money he deserved to have him come back, and then you don't compare it to the first two, it would have probably been an actually half decent film. But in the storyline, that was bars to me as a radically anti-religious folk, watching them go at the church, like the Catholic Church, like that. I was like, damn. I was like, he went into church like that as an Italian. I was like, Coppola. I was like, that was pretty thugged out to me. Has the Catholic Church ever looked worse in a major film? Maybe in like Spotlight when they were doing the scandals, this true story about the scandal. But anyway, so I know that's not what we're here to talk about, because they didn't play any sports in that. I don't even think they talked about sports in those two films.
I've never seen the third one, and I think I've seen half of the second one. So,
wow, you're Daniel. Now you're just exposing your youth and your immaturity and
they're 3-hour long films. I'm supposed to sit here for 3 hours?
Yeah, man. If they're that good, make them 7-8 hours.
Listen, I was made to watch Lawrence of Arabia. Too damn long.
That's a good
I was
one.
made to watch Ben-Hur. Any film that has an intermission at halftime or has a halftime, what are we doing? Great. It's like good stories, but like,
yeah, but
this
is
that
really
got nothing to
interesting
do with The Godfathers. That's all I'm saying.
But long storytelling is an art form that's gone. There's really, I guess the closest thing we come to it recently,
The Irishman,
in terms of trilogies, is either right. Is either what? It's either Lord of the Rings or The Matrix or something. I don't know what's been done since.
No,
then.
the only thing you see in long form now is broken up over long episodic series on Netflix.
Series, right,
That's the only way you could do it.
Oh,
so you would have to.
No, I was going to ask, what did you guys think of Ted Lasso? So we can kind of put these two together. So football plus
did a little
TV
video
shows.
on it. It was trash. It was the most American, North American white cultural imperialism. And I quoted some article that was talking about, again, think about what they're saying. And I kind of credit the article I cited in that video. Damn, we got rid of Mutanda off of that. I didn't mean to get rid of him. Did he leave off of that? But
I thought he was in agreement, but it's okay.
I did too, but no. But it was, you have a white man from the southern United States.
Actually, he's from Kansas. Isn't he from Kansas?
Whatever.
Just from anywhere.
And then anywhere, really, but particularly whose American football expertise is not based on his ability to scheme up or whatever. It's his ability to bond with his subjects, his property. And then he goes over here and he's just solving all the problems with his little witticisms, his little Southern or Western, whatever Americana witticisms. He's solving this one's relationship, this one's gender or sexuality issues, this one's racist issues. And of course, they just start winning off of him knowing nothing about the sport. And then everything. And then I'll stop here. But then when they make the ultimate capitalist villain a Ghanaian, I think the Ghanaian football team owner, I'm like, are there any African owners of a Premier League team? Have there and then he's the villain, and the rich old white folks are like, oh, I don't even understand this level of villainy, and I was just like, no. So
there's villainy, and then there's capitalist villainy. And there's no question about the fact that Black buyer was a capitalist villain. And that's how, I mean, it's just fucked up. There's no question.
And then the only Africans we get, he's got a beef with the Nigerian or whatever over, they're right. They're beefing with each other. And then, I mean.
But you got to deal with the other thing, Jared, which is the brother on the team who was also from Africa, who had a thing with the team owner.
With the white woman owner. Yeah. I mean, of course. She was going to have her.
You can finish that sentence, Jared.
I don't know what I was going to say. What I think about her Mandingo fling.
Wow,
that's where it was because it's the power relationship part of it. It's not two people meeting in a sort of a peer group relationship moment. It's the boss. It's literally called the owner engaging in this relationship, and then and there's none of the chicanery of ownership involved. So they have, even when they break, it's like an amicable breakup that has nothing. So there's no issue over contracts or anything. In fact, she defends him when the Ghanaian dude, when the Nigerian team dude does him dirty, right? With messes up his ability to play with the national team or something like that. He does him dirty, and then he goes to her for consolation. So again, whatever any issues might be with the interracial relationship, it's that power dynamic, and then the way she's allowed to, and ownership and management is allowed to just float off into, and again, the African is look, Jared want fiction to be like real life.
That's a good one.
No, I get that critique aversion to that all the time. It's not that I expect better. What I'm really trying to point out is that they're using fiction to work against the reality of real life, to work against our ability to analyze, interpret, and respond to the realities of real life. It's not even done in some truly fantasy way. We're talking about something that's meant to be happening in this world, that is speaking to this world. And that's sort of what that's what bothers me about stuff like that, when they do stuff like that. At least in The Godfather, that was honest. They don't deal with black people. They don't like black people. They talk bad about black people who are not involved. That's what I need in my movies.
That does pass the Vernon philosophy of black
that's
people.
what I'm saying. That's why The Godfather's the best.
It does pass that. Facts. Listen, Ted Lasso. So y'all remember that scene where there's a scene or episode or whatever where Sam's character wants to boycott the kit sponsor because of what they do in Nigeria, and so they get them to tape over it, amongst other things that happen in that show. Which, admittedly, and this is I don't think it's a contradiction. I think it's actually the Vernon philosophy of black media avoidance working as it should. I can watch Ted Lasso and enjoy it, but also know it's trash, right? I can enjoy certain aspects. But I'm like, dude, what the hell are they doing? Because when they did that, it's like they really make this bleak play of the whole team coming and supporting this dude because now they're going to go against this kit sponsor who's doing this horrible things, as if, and this is real life. So if people don't like it, this is just, this is what it is. As if Premier League teams and other teams from around the world don't do that on a daily, and nothing happens. For the longest, Arsenal, and maybe a couple other teams, but I remember Arsenal being the most prominent in my mind. Arsenal had Visit Rwanda on their jerseys.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because of all the things that people talk about in football, and with teams and finance and all this, because the corruption is endless and everybody's involved in it. But comparatively, not a peep about that and what that has to do with Congolese people, for example, and current genocides going on. So, yeah, Ted Lasso was entertaining, but was it anything else? Was it this big cultural revolution? No.
Hey, look, I watch it. I watch garbage. I'm not some innocent, detached, whatever. and I even like Jason Sudeikis as an actor, to be honest. I think a lot of his stuff is pretty funny, relatively speaking. It's just that if asked, what do I think about? And by the way, so when they have, let me ask you this, Mutanda. I meant to ask you this before. When they have the part in Ted Lasso where the gay football player comes out of the closet and his black buddy has this immediate hostile reaction and storms out, and everybody thinks for multiple episodes it's because no, he doesn't come out. He comes out to his friend, or his friend finds out. His black friend finds out by accident. That's what happens, that his buddy is gay. And then he storms out of the room and they don't talk. And we're obviously meant to think it's because this is his homophobic reaction. And he doesn't. Later, of course, we find out that it's not that. He defends his friend, and in fact, violently at one point with a fan in the stands. And it's because he's angry with his friend because his friend never told him, and that was the real problem. And then it ends with this, after school special, loving friendship moment. So to my point, to the comment from the chat, it's not that they're just trying to recreate fiction for the sake of a fictitious show. They're trying to make a statement about, in this case, homosexual players and the locker room and homophobia and whatever. But I am curious, given your experience, did anybody in your time ever come out? Did locker rooms ever know? And to what extent was that show realistic or not, based on your experience?
So I've played with a teammate who is a homosexual, and at the time, I actually I'm not sure if I don't remember. I don't think I actually knew at the time, just because I think we just moved in different circles. But it wasn't even too much later until I found out. Like, I was still the problem with it, and this is where I mean to borrow from Baldwin, right? He's always a good person to borrow from. It's just not it's just not. They're making a fantasy. It's not necessarily how people interact and how what actually happens. Like, we don't. I think first of all, it's very hard to recreate what the locker room is really like.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's really hard.
I can see that. That makes sense.
Very difficult to do that, right? And obviously, people who haven't been in that don't have an insight to just how. I mean, sometimes how uplifting it can be, the camaraderie and all that, and in some cases how damaging. And far be it for me to speak for the experience of people who might be marginalized in that way. But what I'll say is, like, people know those things. The whole thing they created. My issue with that scene, and I do remember speaking with my wife about it too. Like, again, it's one of those, like, what are we going to pretend that we don't know about, right? Like, what are we going to wake up today and act like we're just knowing this for the first time? Like, people talk, people know, and I think what they do, the whitewashing of Ted Lasso is, they try to make it seem as if, even in like the culture, so like when he goes up in the stands and he fights somebody, there's still a huge segment of English like footballing culture that's incredibly like barbaric, and in a way will always be, right? That they just kind of try to smooth over, and it even shows up in their play, right? So this is me kind of like mixing both of these. Like, there's still an element of it that's so like machismo and hit long balls and we don't like players. How many English pundits or even fans sometimes, just to give an example of what I'm talking about, will get upset because they say something akin to like, all the rivalry in the game is gone, right? Because players are like huggy and they don't do like what Roy Keane used to do, right? Which is just like be an asshole to everybody, not talk to people, freaking slide and cleat people in the kneecaps, end careers, like that sort of thing. And this is a thing, like, oh yeah, these players are too nice, and they're as if the players aren't still sweating and working hard and all that. So I say that just to say, like, it's not my experience with teammates who have been is that people tend to know, and it doesn't go down. It usually, I mean, everybody's different, but I just don't think it's a realistic picture of the locker room, and of what, like, I don't know. I hope that answers your question. I don't know what else I can say about it. It's not realistic.
No, I just thought to ask it. I meant to ask it because a couple of times we brought this up before. I meant to bring that up, and I forgot. So I just thought, but I get it. I can imagine it would be difficult to recreate the locker room and all the dynamics and how people would respond and stuff like that. But really, my point was that they're clearly trying to make a point. Which, and again, it's not to even if we agree with the point, it's to acknowledge the intent. So that's why I think it's important that if we have an analysis or a worldview, that we recognize when it is being addressed by this kind of media. That's all. Where you all want to go next? Any preference? There was a whole bunch of stories in our chat that were of interest. I know Brazil is looming large, and in fact, is this true?
I had homework.
Story in Brazil.
So
Pele's mansion is in ruins. Sorry,
I kind of want to get paid for doing at least some homework. Not like I remember it, but I did have to read something. So can we do the thing that we had to read about? That way, like, we didn't read it for nothing.
Are you talking? What are we talking about? Which one?
You sent us, like, someone wrote what I'm assuming is like some peer review type article about African football. Like, did you guys read that?
Oh man,
yeah, I read that.
I read both, but I wasn't prepared notes wise because I thought we were going to wait until, because if we were invited.
Oh, are we going to wait for? Oh no, okay, no, that's cool.
I honestly,
I would prefer
we could do both.
No,
yeah, go ahead.
If we can get homie to come on the show, I prefer, like, we talk about his work while he's here rather than not.
Oh well, yeah, that was what my intention was. I was sharing it with you so that we could all read it, and then theoretically, I would reach back out and we would set up a time for him to join us.
Cool.
And I haven't done it, so I wasn't clear where we were in that process. So I just haven't done it.
I'm just petty. Like, if somebody makes me read, I just want to talk about what I just read.
No,
that way I don't have to remember.
I hear you. No, I hear you. I'm with you. And
we also have to talk about Daniel's piece.
We don't.
No, we do, because I think
which one? Like the long one that I said, or like the shorter one?
The one about remittances, right? Because that was tied.
Okay. Because there's another long one that's a whole next one. But
listen, y'all. I agree.
I'm confused.
Bring up.
I know I was confused, but we're good. We're good. I remember. We're good.
Daniel sent out a response.
Yeah, the one
article.
you sent out.
Yeah, he sent out a response article.
Right, I read that, but then he's saying something. But now you're saying something about
there's
another one.
I've sent you guys two things that I've written recently. One of them is a long form thing about England, but the other one is the thing about remittances. That was attached to the article that the guy that you met sent you.
Well, I only read that one then, because I don't even think I remember getting the other one. You sent that to our chat too?
I'm still working on that one, Daniel. That's a longer,
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, I don't think I remember that one, Daniel. You
sent it
to the WhatsApp group?
It's an email, but it's.
Oh, it's an email.
You don't read, beloved.
You don't read, beloved.
Well, that's because
there is something.
I'm not linking that. Like, it's lent.
Football heritage.
Oh yeah, this is what I'm here for. Listen, I'm not even gonna apologize for hijacking, but the brother's not here who wrote that article. So
we'll come back to that.
We'll come back to that later.
That's cool.
Listen,
but Daniel was talking.
I'm coming at you. I'm coming at you, Robert.
Pause.
Brazil, and everybody, right? But listen, but it's everybody because this is main for me with the copas and everything happening. It's Brazil and it's Dino. Like this is kicking off, man. Right?
Yeah, they're in bad shape, man. They're not in good shape. You know.
Well, we'll get okay, but tell what's going on with your boys, man. Dino, what's going on?
I think that the problem is a pretty deep problem that has a mix of psychology, political economics involved, and you could even say that race is involved. But the long and the short of it is that I think there are two things that have happened, right? Basically, since my kind of first connection to Brazil. When I first got here, this place was a mecca for the sport. And it was before the export of all the talent to Europe. And in that particular epoch, which is the late 70s and early 80s, what you saw on the field here was like the NBA. I mean, it was like something out of, it was the best talent you could imagine seeing. So that's one thing. The next thing that happened, you could arguably say, is the result of, colonialism. And that is that Europe, after the '82 World Cup, began sucking talent from the rest of the world into Europe. And Brazil, in particular, has not recovered from that. I don't think they'll ever recover from that. So the other thing that's happened is that Brazil has developed itself, economically speaking. There were, 40 years ago, there were a lot more literally vacant lots, places to play. And there has been so much economic development in the big urban centers that a lot of those vacant lots, and even some of the favelas, have been developed to a point where there's literally less places to play. And then you've got the issue of the clubs, right? Which are technically speaking private clubs in Brazil. So all these big name clubs that you hear about, the one I talk about all the time, Flamengo, et cetera, Botafogo, Vasco, São Paulo, all these different names and clubs, they have gone through their own metamorphosis. And they have lost, at least in the past 30 years, all of the people that are being trained in their youth divisions are literally being bought up by the time they're 12 or 13 years old. And they are scheduled for export to Europe no later than 15 or 16 if you're really good. So all of this stuff has impacted how the country has evolved. The racial thing is even more complicated because as I'm speaking to you now, in the Brazilian First Division, I'm pretty sure that there's not one black coach. I don't think there's one black coach. There are a couple of people that are, that we would consider black in the United States, that have kind of, become coaches. But in general, there have been no black coaches, and blacks are quite literally commodities on the field, and that's it. So, and I think that that's a major failure in terms of how the sport is managed to attract more talent, because the leadership roles in management basically don't exist for blacks. And I was talking to a guy today, a very interesting guy, a brother who played basketball for Flamengo. And it's just, the racism in Brazil is structurally much worse than the United States, much worse. So at any position of decision making, whether it be in sports or other forms of entertainment or in the corporate world or in politics, anywhere you look, blacks have largely been excluded. And it's taken a toll on the country, you know? And then you've got this right-wing, evangelical-driven fascist turn that Brazil barely headed off with the election of Lula. And there's just a very depressed kind of feeling in the country. And I don't think there's a team on the planet that reflects the mentality of the people more than Brazil does, in some, in a sense of being connected to the people. You know, the Seleção is a projection of the collective unconscious of the country. And this is a very bad period of time for Brazil. Now, looking at the Copa America, they're just not, first of all, they're not playing well together. I think the coach in this past game against Costa Rica made a conservative decision in taking out Vinny Jr. and putting in Eldrick. I mean, what he should have done was go with a 4-2-4 and just risked taking chances up front, because he's got that kind of talent, and he just wouldn't do it. He didn't want to take that risk. So I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they got kicked out in the first round, to tell you the truth, because Paraguay is not going to be easy. Now, maybe he'll make some adjustments. That's very, very likely. He'll make some adjustments. But it ain't going to be an easy road, because the psychological aspect of this team is shaky. It's shaky. I was go so far as to say one concluding remark is that they do have a lot of individual young talent, like world-class young talent. It's just that so far they haven't been able to pull it together. But if you look at Brazil's history, when they've got quote unquote a golden generation, it usually means that they go to consecutive World Cup finals in a row. So from 58 to 70, they went to 3 World Cup finals and won all 3. From 94 to 2002, they went to 3 World Cup finals in a row and won 2. So I think that the test isn't the Copa America. I mean, nobody here in Brazil takes the Copa America seriously. This is a warm-up for the World Cup. And if they somehow pull their act together in time for the World Cup and do something in the World Cup, then I think you're talking, they're going to be a power for the next 2 or 3 World Cups. That's my read. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but that's my read.
So I think this is perfect, because without preparation or planning, so much of what you said dovetails with what this video that I've been playing in the background has been arguing. And it's something that I looked up in preparation for today, and why the Brazilian team is struggling. And they deal more with the issue in terms of class than race, but basically dovetailing what you just said, that initially the teams were comprised of people from all over Brazil and from many of the poorest parts of Brazil who grew up playing and learning in Brazil.
Yeah.
Over time, that has changed, and a lot of the players have been moving and growing and learning to play as Europeans in Europe. So that now, I'm skipping a lot, but now the team plays more like a European team. And this video actually breaks down a little bit of the playing style, the formations and whatnot, to show how they don't play like they used to. They play more like a European team, because that's where most of the players play now. And that's where they're learning now. So they're not learning that sort of different, whatever Brazilian style football anymore. And then, to your point, the video also talks about how where once that iconic jersey came to represent all of the people because of Bolsonaro in particular and the right wing turn. And apparently, did Neymar support Bolsonaro? Because
not only did Neymar support Bolsonaro, but this may not be known very well outside of Brazil, but this is 2024. I'd say maybe 8 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, when he kind of first came on the scene in Spain, there were several instances where, for all practical purposes, he denied that he was black. And
wow.
And the same thing happened to Nazario. Nazario did the same thing.
Wow.
You know, and Nazario has made a lot of money. Neymar has too. And I suspect that both of them, when you don't have a formal education at all, and you've got people around you who are there to milk the cow, I mean, you're just not going to learn a lot about how the world works. It's just not going to happen, you know?
Anyway, so just real quick, what the video was saying was because of all of that and the right wing turn and the jersey being adopted by Bolsonaro as co-opted,
it's absolutely ridiculous.
That to your point about the emotional connection, it's been broken. And the people who were the Brazilians interviewed in this piece, at least, were saying that, and then of course that Germany collapse in the World Cup was one of these severing, they just can't. So yeah, I just thought it was interesting. So without prompting it out, I'm glad they were able to provide some visuals for you and your summary, your analysis, because it dovetailed perfectly with what that video was saying in many ways. It's So
I mean, they continue to produce talent. Don't get me wrong, right? I mean, the talent still is getting produced. I think that it's tailed off to the level of talent that they had in the 80s and 90s, but they're still producing more talent than any other country in the world. Argentina has, I think, tailed off too, but they're still producing a decent amount of talent. But those are those two countries, along with Colombia, I would say are the leading exporters of talent today to Europe, out of Latin America. I don't think that Uruguay is doing something. I mean, Uruguay's got some big name people. It's just that Uruguay has gone through a real transformation because they used to be a global football power at the level of clubs. Like there are two clubs in Montevideo, Peñarol and Nacional, that are without question, I mean, the equivalent of any club in Latin America. But in the past 30 years, they have literally fallen off the map. You know, no money, no player development, the whole 9 yards. So they've disappeared from global competitions. But they used to be absolutely formidable. As formidable as Boca Juniors and Flamengo and any other club down here. So there've been some socioeconomic machinations that have really transformed the landscape of talent down here.
But the reality at the end of the day, though, is that the United States, according to Mutanda, has caught up to them talent wise, and that's why when they drew 1-1 the other day.
Why are you doing this, man?
Mutanda, I don't think that's what. I hope that's not what Mutanda's saying.
That's not what he's
saying. Jared just flamed.
He's being messy. He's being
fanning the flames, man.
I just was trying to get it to my Daniel era. That's all. I was just trying to.
Before we get there, I only have one thing to add because that was basically my whole point. But it's not just that they're capturing the mind, meaning Europe is capturing the minds of how Brazilian plays. there's also, you have to think, when you look at the 2014 World Cup, right, in particular, because that's, everybody says, oh, the 7-1 is the moment, boo, boo, boo. The strikers that Brazil took to that World Cup were Fred or Fregi, however y'all say it, and Joe. Fred and Joe, okay? The best Brazilian striker at that World Cup was not even a Brazilian, passport-wise. It was Diego Costa, but he was a Spanish international.
Yeah, he was playing on Spanish. Yeah.
So it's not just
right.
it's not just the capture of how Brazilians play in their own mind. You also have to consider Pepe. You have to consider Thiago Alcantara, Jorginho, Diego Costa. They take actual Brazilians, and then Emerson is an Italian international. They take Brazilians and naturalize them into Europeans. So it happens both ways. To Robert's point,
7-1.
No, it's bad. It's bad. But
to the Germans,
it's bad at home, no less. But
you know, just to contextualize the German thing, in 2002, when Brazil played Germany in the World Cup final, and they beat them 2-0, that was the first time that Germany and Brazil had ever confronted each other in a World Cup. Ever. And to the best of my recollection, I could be wrong about this, but I think in 2014, it was the second time they met in an official World Cup competition. So they haven't, you know, they've had friendlies, but they've never been, you know, quote unquote, face to face that many times. But there's no question about the fact that the Germans represent, even more than the Anglo-Saxons, you know, the whole thing of, you know, Nazi supremacy, you know, that whole dynamic.
and they kept using the word machine in the commentary during the World Cup. The German machine, a fine-tuned machine. The shit was terrible. It was traumatic for everybody outside of Germany and outside of you know.
I don't know German, but I know their team is called Die Mineshaft. I wonder if Mineshaft means machine. I have no idea because I don't speak that language. But Die Mineshaft, something like that.
I'll wait for the chat to tell us. The chat is never wrong.
What does Mineshaft mean? Does that just mean team, or does it mean machine? I'd be curious to know.
I thought Machina, because wasn't Ex Machina? Isn't that German?
That's Latin.
I don't know.
Oh, yeah, you're probably right.
I think they've retired. They might have retired that saying for.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, but
it means team. Okay, cool.
Yeah, German's just that kind of a language where that just sounds menacing, but it literally, it's just team.
Mineshaft.
But Jared was gonna go off on something related to Brazil.
Mineshaft means community. Oh, that's cool.
Go ahead, Jared. Were you gonna go off on something?
It just sounds like machine.
No, I've only no.
Hey.
No. I'm sorry, everybody. Go ahead. Yes, please go ahead.
Mutanda.
There's something called football heritage.
There you go.
Hold up, because I made it.
There is something that I used to call football heritage.
That's definitely worth listening to.
People need to. I don't want to be misunderstood. I root for Brazil, generally speaking, because it's for many reasons. My interest here today. my interest here today is to cause violence. In this sense, and this is where Jared was kind of being sneaky. But what I never said, of course, that the U.S. is catching up and all that. But this is based off of, and just to give people into us who don't have insight into our chats, right? Obviously, Copa America is happening. U.S. team is playing, right? And when they play Brazil, there are all sorts of things flying around in our chat about where their level and Brazil's level and all that, et cetera, et cetera. And my thing with Brazil is this, and now maybe this is me speaking as the the coach in me, so forgive me, but allow me a little bit, because part of what I put, if you can see, I have the anti-mystique in football, because this is also related to conversations that were had previously,
Yes.
and about, does Mystique, where's Mystique, and even with Real Madrid. Now, if we can all admit, I think people would agree, right, that from a club perspective, the Real Madrid shirt, there are few shirts, if any, that carry more quote unquote mystique than the Real Madrid shirt. Okay. On the international stage, few shirts, if any, carry more mystique than the Brazil shirt. But this is why I'm here. It's not enough. And it's never been enough.
Not enough. Not enough what?
It's not enough for Brazil to return to a place where they're considered, I mean, they're always going to be considered prominent players, right? Because obviously the talent there is undeniable and the passion for football is undeniable. But I guess my biggest frustration with Brazilian football, I don't even just say fans, but it's more like the discussions around it, is that, and I think there are some people who do, I think, a better job than others about being more more analytical and being real in terms of the footballing discussions, because I think there are real footballing human reasons, and you mentioned some of those, Robert, which I appreciate. But what I push back on is this idea that, like, I do somewhat push back on the idea that one of the main things why Brazil's struggling is because of Europeans coming and taking all their talent, and then like players in Europe who don't learn the Brazilian style. I just think that's easily refutable. For example, and I think somebody might have put it in the chat, but a lot of Argentina's players are taken young. A lot of Argentina's players play abroad. Right? And I can list any number of countries, actually, a lot of countries, actually. Probably most of the powerful players in international football, most of the players who make up their top international squads don't play domestic football, right? It's very rare. Actually, England's one of the rare ones. But
what's your point?
So my point is this. So saying, Brazilians players, or the national team is struggling because the players are, here and there and there. That's always been the case. And it's the case for a lot of teams. Daniel, you're shaking your head. You disagree?
Yeah, I disagree too. I mean, the first thing I want to do is
add one examples.
I want to add one more factor so you can consider this.
Okay.
The other side of colonialism, the psychic side of colonialism, is that one of the reasons that Brazil is playing the kind of football they play is because they have been convinced by Europeans that they can't win unless they play like Europeans. And
by who? Who's convinced? Who's convinced them? And who believes that?
The powers that be in Brazil.
The teams hiring them in Europe.
Yeah, the powers that be in Brazil basically take their cues from Europe. And the best proof, and this hasn't really changed since 1982, but the last team that played, quote unquote, like Brazil was the 82 World Cup team. And they got their asses handed to them by Italy. And ever since then, if you look at 94, right? You look at 98, you look at 2002. Nobody talks about the fact that those three teams in 94, 98, and 2002 had some of the best defenses that Brazil has ever played with. They were basically using the European model in all three of those World Cups with only two men up front, which is a dramatic change from the way that Brazil usually plays in the World Cup prior to 82. Up to 82, they would have 3 or 4 up front because they had the talent to do that. After that bomb out of 82, which, I mean, just in terms of the beauty of that team, they basically turned it and they said, look, we got to play a different kind of way. We got to play like Europeans. Otherwise, we can't beat the Europeans. And in theory, they proved that theory in 94. When they beat Italy in the World Cup in 94, they, quote unquote, they proved it. Even though they basically gave that game to the Italians because it went to penalties. So they basically gave that game to the Italians. They could have lost in penalties for easily, but they didn't. Then they had that debacle in France, which everybody in Brazil thinks was concocted and thrown so that France could win on their own home turf. Nobody believes that France actually won that game, but whatever, And then you got 2002 when they had a fucking freak show. I mean, everybody on the fucking team was a freak. So there was just no way anybody was going to beat the 2002 team because they were too damn good, right? And they went back to that old model of 3 or 4 up front attacking. So part of the problem,
just so I understand you, are you saying that them going, so the success, you're attributing the success in 2002 to Brazil reverting to a model where they have more, where they take more risk? Is that what you're saying? Like more front?
I think they changed the schemata. They didn't do a 4-4-2 in 2002. They did either a 4-3-3 or 4-2-4, depending on the circumstances. And the only reason they could do that was because they had the talent up front to take the pressure off the midfield and off the defense and dominate, the latter half of the field in terms of offense. They had so much offense, they didn't have to worry about defense.
That team is pretty sick.
And all I'm saying is that, it's a generational freak of nature to have a team like 2002. And so what they've done is they've gone back to the old model of 1994. It's basically a 4-2-4. I mean, you can play around with it. Say, oh no, it's 5-3-1, and then 1 or 2 up front. But they still have never embraced the idea of taking a risk when you've got, Vinicius, you've got Eldrick now. Neymar's obviously hurt, and I tell you the truth, I would rather for Neymar not to get back to the national team because I don't want to support a fascist on the field. But but in terms of talent, yeah, I mean, but Neymar has talent. The problem is that he has never had a coach that has been able to put him in his place and keep him there. And interestingly enough, this coach that just joined the national team was his coach at Santos. So there's an argument that says maybe he will be able to, hold Neymar down. Because I think Neymar, quite frankly, is more of a detriment to the team than is a benefit.
Wow.
Too much ego.
A lot of people would disagree with you on that. Like a lot of
but they haven't won shit with Neymar. What the fuck have they won with Neymar? Excuse me.
An Olympic gold medal.
That's about who gives a shit about the Olympics? Who gives a shit about the Olympics? I mean, fuck the Olympics.
Hey, but wait, to be fair, never mind his politics, but if we're only talking about the field, that game, Neymar did his thing in that game against Croatia in the last World Cup. And it was the defensive collapse at the end that took away
Fred.
That goal he got for them was brilliant.
I think you're right.
It was such a disservice.
I think you're right.
To for them to go out like that against Croatia.
You're absolutely correct.
It robbed us of Brazil against Argentina, which is the worst thing ever. That.
Neymar versus Messi, all of that, but it robbed us. It really, for me, it robbed. Again, I wasn't up on Neymar's politics. I think I probably consciously or unconsciously avoided it on purpose.
Yeah.
But I was like, damn, man, because he gets a lot of grief. He wasn't there for that 7-1 with his broken back, so he was like, this was his, I don't know why you laughing. That joint, like,
no. It's because like when. Was it David Luiz and Marcelo or something? They were holding up Neymar's shirt. It was like he died. Yeah. It was over the top.
No, they were trying to deflect from the fact that they were on the field for that debacle.
That happened before the game.
Oh, well.
So before the game, it was like a eulogy or like a funeral, and then just the first 30 minutes it was 5-0.
Yeah, that was great. So
Why-
yeah,
why-
but that's it. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, why I was shaking my head with Matana because he brought up Argentina, and
Just
I
as
think
an
Robert.
example, there are others.
Yeah, and I didn't.
No, no,
get-
no,
I
no.
didn't-
But like this is
Daniel go ahead,
my
'cause
only
I
one.
wanted to say something about Argentina too, because you cannot compare Argentina to Brazil. I'm sorry.
This just loosely adjacent to Robert's sentence. Argentinians going to Europe is like them going back home based on their ethnic composition. So they're just like how would you put it? Messi, it's an Italian surname. Guys like McAllister and all of those dudes. Like Argentinians aren't playing with a particular type of flair. They call it samba, I guess, or joga bonito, whatever it
They
is.
call it Ginga. They call it Ginga.
Cool. I like that. I like that. So Argentina is kind of being taken young and going to Europe and learning the European style. That's what they want to do because that's the style of football that Argentina generally play. It's a European style just with some South American adjacentness thrown in there. Brazil, you can't really make that same argument when you think about stereotypical Brazilian football. It doesn't look like European football. It doesn't feel like it. There's a whole different dynamic to it that when they do go to Europe, there's a higher level of adaptation to the stereotype that must be done. So saying that young Brazilians going to Europe and young Argentinians going to Europe, as if that's 1-1, I don't think it's 1-1 necessarily, because there's a level of Africanity that Argentina purposely took out of themselves through genocide, etc., that Brazil haven't done. So it makes the Europeanization of Brazilian football a bit more problematic. And but Brazil trying to beat Europeans at a European game will never work. I think Argentinians have a better chance at doing that.
So I hear that now. Here's my like. You know who Juan Roman Riquelme is, right? Okay, Riquelme, Argentinian legend. I mean, amazing 10. He's one of, not the only, but maybe he's one of the most prominent players who Argentinian and doesn't fit a lot of what we're talking about, what you're talking about here in terms of the European flavor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And has been fit. So, and this is my point is, I don't think even the Messi's whole thing with the Dutch team in this last World Cup was because of that and how they treated it, how Van Gaal treated Riquelme when he had it. So my point is this: look, Brazil, of course, there's something to be said for the psychosocial, the colonial imperialist part of this that has something to do with where the Celestao is now. Hopefully I didn't butcher that. But also what I hear, I'll be perfectly honest with you, and this is where I push. And the reason I said I was coming for you, Robert, but now it's a discussion. But because I also think though, one of the things I will be honest that irks me about this conversation about Brazil, and it irks me because I want them to be good because I do love so many of their players, that are amazing, that have done so much for football, right? Well, I think what irks me is the discussion veers off into so many different things, in part because people don't want to have it's not even so much a difficult conversation, but I think it's a more humble one in this sense. Football is hard and a lot of people have talent. So to me, the argument, well, Brazil's always had this individual talent. And yeah, that it's what's been proven historically. And this is why my whole Mourinho thing was just listing off their results, because this period isn't even new in the terms of like them having a drought in terms of winning stuff. This has happened before. They've gone long stretches without winning something. And even if you look now, right, it's not even just not winning, but it's also how you lose. To me, that says a lot about where you're at. And that's especially why in 2014, the 7-1 was so egregious. Who gets beat 7-1 in that? Like, to me, that's throw out all of this stuff about I mean, you can't obviously throw it out, but it's like you have a semifinal at home. And I think in that game, there was a 5-minute period where Germany scored 3 goals. I'm sorry. That has nothing to do with all of these very relevant, I'm admitting with you, I agree with you, very relevant things that are going on in the culture of Brazil and all that. That's players just not doing something that they should be doing. And in Brazilian football, I do think there's a certain, we talk about the arrogance of Europeans. I think there's an arrogance of Brazilian football as well, in this sense. And it's in one sense you can say it's earned, but I also think it's time to wake up. And this is where I'm like, this is now, if we combine the events of these last few weeks, this is my hope for Brazilian football. I think there needs to be a humbling and a kind of a come to Jesus, if you will, of like, yo.
Don't tell them to do that.
Yeah, well, yeah.
They're already with Jesus.
Yeah, facts.
They might need to step back from Jesus.
Step back.
Yeah, we got enough
but in that
evangelicals down here already, man. We need evangelicals.
Yeah. Facts.
Hey, 1-1 against the U.S. should be enough. That should be enough.
Okay, all right, okay. My point exactly. Another team in which people have discussions. Not because they don't really know what's going on, but it's hard because of all the stuff going around and the social aspect of it, the geopolitics of it. People may not assess something as accurately as they should. The U.S. team is better than a lot of people think. I'm not saying they've caught up to Brazil in terms of talent, or I'm not saying they've caught up to. I mean, there are any number of teams, but if you look at the state of the U.S. men's program and the women's, we can talk about. That's a whole other thing because it's kind of like the inverse is happening with them, which is interesting for the same reasons, I might add, footballing wise. The U.S. men's national team is full of young players who are playing in top leagues, right? Like the top team that they call in for these major tournaments. They are playing. People can argue about how much they play at their clubs and what their contribution is and are they world class and it's like that. All I'm saying is objectively, you have a program that's producing, right? And the U.S. has been exporting young players to top leagues in the world. It's happening. So even when we have that, when Dorival, the Brazilian coach, is asked in his press conference about the U.S. and he gives an answer, right, about like, oh, man, they're good and this and that. Like, he's not taking the piss. He's not giving coach speak. He's actually recognizing, this is a young up-and-coming squad, and they are young, and they're players who are hungry. And the way that football is, and it's hard to win football games, and there's lots of talent everywhere. If you're organized, you have some flair, you have some talent, you're going to stand a chance. And my thing now, bringing back to my critique of Brazil, has always been this, because they've always had talent. My critique of Brazil is I do believe that sometimes they feel, and then when you listen to people talk, this is the impression I get, is they feel that somehow Brazil has this like God-given right to win football games because they produce really talented players. It don't work that way. It's never worked that way. And this is where the reality comes in. Since they won the World Cup in 2002, right? In the World Cup only, the Copa America, they won a few. Robert, you're the one who said, I didn't say this, but you said that the Brazilians don't even take Copa America seriously. Okay. But what's interesting is after 2002, here are the results. 2004, they won Copa America. 2006, they lost to France in the quarterfinal. That was Ronaldinho's group, right? Ronaldinho's amazing.
Can we pause here and just say Zidane had one of the greatest midfield performances of all time in that game?
Zidane was amazing. But
Ran the
yeah,
show.
2006, they lost to France. 2007, they won Copa America. 2009, this is a smaller tournament. Copa America is not a small tournament, but the Confederations Cup, some people may not know what it is, but it's a pretty small tournament. They beat the United States men's national team in 2009 in the Confederations Cup final. And the score in that final was 3-2. And so again, backing up what I said about the U.S. program being better than people think, the U.S. men's national team has always kind of been there or thereabouts, but obviously they're not elite world class, but they're there. This is 2009, and that was a difficult game. The U.S. men in that Confederations Cup beat Spain, I think. They ended like a long unbeaten run for Spain or something, and then they played Brazil in the final, and the final was 3-2. Back to Brazil. In 2010 World Cup, they lost to Holland in the quarters. 2011, they lost to Paraguay in the quarters of Copa America. 2014, 7-1 at home against Germany in the semifinal of the World Cup. 2015, lost in the knockout round to Paraguay in Copa. And again, and people talking about, and this is what I mean about football being hard and Brazil need to humble themselves, nobody would be like, oh, Paraguay is like a extreme world power dominant. We wouldn't say that, right? Paraguay is not Italy. They're not Germany. They're not France, right? 2016, Brazil went out in the group stage of Copa America. The group stage. So even if, to Robert's point about people taking it serious or not, I don't know, I can't say, not in Brazil, but you went out in the group stage. Brazil shouldn't be doing that. 2018, lost to Belgium in the quarters. 2019, they won Copa America in Brazil. So that was a victory. That ended a streak of
no Neymar.
Yeah, no okay. And then in 2022, in Qatar, lost to Croatia's in the quarterfinal. So why do I list all that? That's my Mourinho football heritage stuff. I list that to say they've had, to varying degrees, very good teams, and maybe some people would say subpar teams through all that. But in that run, they've never been the dominant force that a lot of people will claim that they should be, given the talent that they have. And it's not good enough for me to explain that away with, oh, see, all their players are being roboticized by Europe and all that. Even though I get it, there's an element of truth to that. And we can talk about playing styles and all that. But I actually think the point you made, Robert, about the racism in Brazil and how the lack of black coaches in Brazil, I look at Brazil as a country that's incredibly schizophrenic in terms of their football, right?
Yeah,
and
I think that's true.
I appreciate you, Robert, for putting me onto this book, because I'm almost done with it, and it's a fantastic read.
Yeah, it's a great book.
It's a fantastic read. One of the main things I'm getting from this book, right, and it just goes back to the history of Brazilian football and how the black players in Brazil, and later maybe for another discussion we can recap this or whatever, but
we should all read that and do a show on it. I like getting homework and deadlines and assignments.
It's a fascinating book. It's a fascinating book. The main thing I get from this book, is there's always been this tension. There's always been this tension in Brazilian football about who's gonna get credit for what, and who's gonna and obviously, and still this is Robert, you can back me up on this. It can't be too black, right? It can never be too black. Since the beginning, right? It's like, oh, there's a quota on how many black players, and also like certain black players who they in some way revel in the fact that they're black because they can get away with certain things, but after the game is over, they know, oh, I'm black, so I can't go to the team functions, and so there's this incredible what do we do with ourselves? What is Brazilian identity really? And that, I actually do think that stuff comes out in terms of how they play. When I watch Brazil, I see a team sometimes that's like all over the place and plays even in '98. One of the commentaries was, this is a group that plays more like individuals, right, than a collective. And I think that, to me, the reason, and this is now the coach in me talking, I'll wrap it up by saying this. What I think is beautiful about this example of Brazil, and they're not the only ones, but this is why I'm saying mystique in football, people need to really think about what it is. You cannot just rely on having these incredible individuals if you don't solve footballing problems with football solutions, right? Your collective matters. And here's the thing, that's not a European construct. I will always push back on the idea that oh no, that's a European thing about playing collective. No, you always have to play collective. It just may be, I think Brazilian teams in the past all did play collective, even though they had amazing individuals, but they understood one another on a different level, right? And even though they had flair, it was a collective flair. And I think what they're missing now, if I'm brutally honest, is I think they're struggling to identify exactly what they are and what they want to be. And you get all this nonsense that Ronaldinho was spewing, because we haven't touched on it, but what he was spewing was absolute nonsense, and I'm glad he was called out on it. Because far be it for me to disrespect Ronaldinho, he's one of the GOATs. He's one of my favorite players to watch ever. But 100%, the response to him from the Brazilian players was spot on. Yo, we care about this shirt. We bleed. We're struggling. But this shit is hard. So all I want for Brazil is for them to step back. You're not entitled to win football matches, clearly, because you haven't won anything in a long time. So sort yourselves out and stop blaming Europe for everything.
I think
Damn.
I think that's a fair. I think that's
Yeah,
a
but if
fair,
a white man said
fair
that,
critique. I think
No,
that's
I'm
a fair
joking, I'm
critique.
But why? I'm saying it. Daniel, come on, man.
I'm playing. Just that last sentence, they'll cut it. You know
Yeah,
what I'm
facts. I know I was on dangerous ground there, but I'm in safe company. I trust you.
But, you know, but let me add one more caveat to what you just said, because there's a lot of a lot to chew on with what you just said. I think that there's something else at work with the analysis. There are two things I want to point out. One is the mentality of Brazilians, because mentality here, and this is culture wide, like wherever you go, they have a complex here that they call the vira-lata concept or complex,
That sounds
which
bad.
means, yeah, I mean, it's basically the mixing of two breeds of dog.
I knew it was bad. I didn't
Yeah.
even know.
Okay.
I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was bad.
That's the quote unquote the Brazilian problem, right? The Brazilian problem is the
Which
vira
is
lata
anti-black
concept.
at its core, right?
It's
The
anti-black at its
mongrel
core.
complex. It's just- yeah.
The quintessential example of it was in 1950 when Brazil
The
lost
mongrel
the World Cup.
complex.
They
The
lost
mongrel
the World Cup.
complex. That's what.
Yeah, it's even worse than that though, because in 1950 they lost the World Cup final to Uruguay 2-1, and the goalie was a black goalie.
Barbosa.
Yeah. And he literally spent the rest of his life, carrying that burden around of being a quote unquote black person that couldn't perform under pressure. Now, of course, until Pelé came around, I mean, Pelé like turned that shit on its head, right? People shut the fuck up after that stuff. but for a long time, it's there below.
And
the
all
surface.
he had to do was be the best ever on the planet.
Exactly.
That's all he had to do.
That's all he had to do, right? It's like, so that is there. Now, the other thing that's there, which nobody talks about, including especially our friends at FIFA, is that, and this goes back to my beef that Butanda takes issue with, which is the athletes that are playing the sport today in 2024 are in better shape, they have better skills, and they are better than their counterparts of 50 years ago. And I'm saying that to say that it is a shame that FIFA has not changed the rules to adapt this game to what has transpired over the past 50 years in terms of athletic performance. Because what's happened is we're using the old quote unquote regime of fouls and what have you that we had 50 years ago. And as a result, the game has lost a lot of its panache. Now, obviously, there have been exceptions. There have been exceptions, no question. Like the Barcelona team that was that I think Guardiola was the coach, and they were unreal. There have been other teams that have been very, very impressive, but in general, the quality of the spectacle on the field has been damaged, in my opinion, because the quality of the people that are playing the game is better today than it's ever been, and their talent is being restricted because of the
The game is worse because the players are better. That's paradoxical.
No, I'm saying the game is worse because the rules haven't changed to adapt to the better players.
So you're one of those people that thinks they should raise the rim from 10 feet to 11 feet.
No, I'm not saying
because
that.
it's too easy for LeBron to dunk and it's too easy for Curry to shoot. So raise the rim.
I'm saying something else. What I'm saying is that there are fouls constantly in this game that people get away with, and there are no repercussions. There are zero repercussions. And so all I'm saying is the game stops when there's a foul committed, right? Stops. Unless it's an egregious foul, play continues. The only time an egregious foul, quote unquote, appears is when somebody gets a yellow. All I'm saying is that needs to change. People need to pay a price, both individually and collectively, for those kinds of fouls. They're happening anyway. You look at the stats page at the end of the game, they usually have fouls committed by both respective teams. All I'm saying is it's happening anyway. They're whistling it. The clock stops. They reset the ball. I'm saying it when people foul, they should pay a price, both individually and team-wise. That's all. And
How does this solve the Brazilian problem?
I think it'll solve the problem because I think it will open up the game in a way that nobody anticipates, particularly for skilled players. Because here's my quote unquote left wing assessment of this, right? Look at the Europeans, and please don't take this the wrong way, okay? But look at who look at who has won the Ballon d'Or for the past like 25 years, right? Look at who the players are who have won it, right? I mean, aside from Cristiano Ronaldo, I think he's won like 5 or 6 times, and then there's Modric, so that's one. And then there's Cannavaro, which is 1, 2. But other than that, they've all been imports. They've all been from Latin America, right? So all I'm saying is that the talent that we see on TV is gonna shine regardless. What I'm saying is that the star of the brightness that is cast on us as spectators could be greater if they changed the rules of the game and protected the talent that's on the field.
Oh, okay. So this is a question I have for Matanda, and I think Robert's point maybe touches on it or segues with it. Is the question, or is the problem rather, that Brazil have talent and that talent isn't playing well? Or is it a question of, do Brazil have talent, period, relative to what they had before? Because I'm more in the camp that the Brazilian team that exists right now, outside of maybe Vinicius, like how many of those dudes are getting into the 02 team, into the 06 team, into the 2010 team even? So we don't even need to go back to 1970, 1958. We don't need to go back that far. But if we just look at the last great generation, how many of these players are starting? Allison, the goalie,
that's a good observation.
And the rest of the team, other than Vinny might get in, but when you're looking at Romario, Ronaldo, and Ronaldinho, he's not playing. He's a bench player. So there's a difference between the talent isn't as good as what we had versus like this talent isn't being coached in the right way, isn't playing the right way. There's just a bare question of, is this squad even talented to warrant what we think of what Brazil should be?
Yeah, I think that's a good observation.
But it's always difficult. You forgive me if it's always difficult if when we're comparing like past generations, there's always an element of subjectivity to it, because the fact of the matter is we have no way of comparing them, like of they're going to play against each other. So I go back to objectively. What I'll say is this, and I know, like Daniel, you got irked with me, and I understand why, because I said it a lot. But I really have been stuck on this whole and it's not contained to football, but I think it is important in these discussions. I just don't think people have enough grace for the laborers in this sense. I'll say it again. Football is hard. And so I actually want to take that point you made, Daniel, about the talent in Brazil, but I want to move it. I don't think it's a question of, how would that talent fare up with older Brazilian teams? I think the question is, when you look at world football, it's how does that talent compare to other places that are also producing talented players? Like, the game has grown. Whether or not people cannot like capitalism, and I would agree with that. But it's like, listen, this is a labor, right? You have professional players. It's very difficult to sign a professional contract and earn a living at it. The game is more accessible now. I mean, at a certain level of play. If you hear what I'm saying, like more people are playing the game and trying to go somewhere with it. When England won the World Cup in '66, right? Like, how many nations were they actually going up against, right? And how many nations were just not even comparable? Now,
Africa boycotted, by the way.
Exactly, right? So it's so objective. We can all agree, like, there are some talented players. In terms of a talent hotbed, and this has been the case for a while, this is not new. I'm not saying it rivals because obviously, geographically it's much, much smaller. But folks, do you all see the level of talent coming out of France, and specifically a certain part of France, right?
Yeah.
In Paris is, if you look at top clubs around the world, there are so many players that have roots, and they're African. A lot of them are African, that have roots to French clubs, youth clubs, and certainly suburbs of Paris, this area, and so many of these players. Some players who even like cult legends, right? Cult legends. People may not even know. Like Riyad Mahrez is, grew up in France, and et cetera, et cetera. So many players. Riyad Mahrez was never close to being on the French team. What's my point? My point is, and again, look at France's team in terms of where their players play. Yes, I know, okay, they're European, but so many of those players don't play when we talk about, what is a European style? Like, you trying to tell me Paul Pogba couldn't stand shoulder to shoulder? Paul Pogba at his best couldn't stand shoulder to shoulder with any Brazilian player in terms of flair and what he wants to do on the ball. Like, he's a player. So again, world football is full of talented players. It's full of talented players. And Brazil is in a situation where, identity. You have to figure out what you are. And you have to, and I think the Mongol complex here is huge. I couldn't agree more, Robert. Like, this whole thing of like, who are we and what are we about as a nation? It comes out in your football.
Yeah, there's an inferiority complex.
100%. I agree with that.
And it just doesn't help that Drake is currently leading a global setback of all so-called mixed race, multiracial communities. He is single-handedly dragging us all. No.
Oh no! Tell me about this.
No, we don't have time for all that. It's a joke for those paying attention or who know. It's just something silly. But on some level, I do take it seriously that it does not help the situation in Brazil that Drake is so publicly ruining. Of course, Yipper, I will always, in your eyes, have to do better, and I will always fail. So
oh, shit.
we will always. But the real issue, though, this is the problem with what's happening in Brazil. I can't tune in to Brazil playing the U.S. men's national team and seeing these kinds of crowds. Like, this is what's driving me bananas. Like, look at this man's face. Look at the jubilance. Look at the jingoistic white jubilance. Look at this man's face. This is not a man who cares one iota about the sport or the game. This is a man in full. Look at it. Even says why I hate American soccer fans. I just noticed that. Look at this man's face. Look at did she grow up caring about soccer, or is this just another whites winning moment? And I just can't stand it. Look at all of this, man. More beer. I can't stand it. When I tune in. And see Brazil playing the U.S. I want to see them. Amazing. I want to see tears. I want to see sadness.
It's amazing, Jared, that you are bringing this up in that way because, and it's an awful thing to say, but it's absolutely true. There is no football culture in the United States. It doesn't exist. And exactly what exists is exactly.
Mutanda's like, hell nah, bro. Don't say that.
Mutanda, you know what? Mutanda, you know what? I hate to say this.
The Americans. There is something that.
But here it is. I mean, Mutanda is like protesting, but the fact of the matter is that what Jared just showed on the screen isn't football culture. That's like, and I hate to say it, but it's the bastardized version that the NFL has allowed to take shape in the United States, which is, not a culture. It's a cult. There's not a culture there. That's a cult. Those pictures are people that are involved in a cult, and I
never made the correlation between those two words before.
Yeah,
cult and culture.
See, the problem is, Mutanda, you spent too much time on the field playing. The rest of us were in the stands suffering those crowds. That's where you're on the field. Maybe it doesn't resonate. No,
what's so funny though is what you just said though, Robert, is interesting because it's funny. You watch like the coverage of the European Championships. Y'all trying to tell me those crowds of like those Dutch hordes of people doesn't look like a cult?
No, they hate black people just as much, but they actually love the game.
What are we doing? Yeah. No, listen. Yeah. I want to. No, I hear you. Right? We've been.
Not only do they love it, but they know the game.
I want to. But listen, respectfully though, we got to be more. Let's be more. Let's give people more. I agree with your larger point, Robert, which is that yes, the powers that be have put an artificial lid on the sport. 100%. I think that's a strong. I think the evidence of that is everywhere. I think that's a brilliant point. Where I fault, where you not you lose me, or where I push back because I live it, right? I live it, is that when we say there's a lack of football culture, that it's just not. It's not true. It's suppressed. But doesn't mean it's not there.
Wait, okay. No,
I agree.
So
I agree
is
fair. But in the suppression, what they've done is to transmogrify it. So
define that word for me.
It means that it is a monstrous aberration of what it should be.
Okay.
Like if you look at and Latana can verify this. If you look at youth football in the United States today, both on the men and the women's side, the vast majority of those players, and I'm guessing, Mutanda, you have to help me out here, but I'm guessing it's like 2/3, if not more, are white, largely suburban kids.
In the larger sport, but what's interesting is in the academies, it's not like that.
In the academies, it's what?
In the elite level academy. I'll give the example of FC Dallas.
Now, again, let's qualify this by saying, give me a fucking break, right? FC Dallas is not an elite academy by any stretch of the imagination. Ain't shit in MLS an elite academy anywhere. Let's just get that straight.
Okay.
Let's put MLS in its place where they belong.
Damn.
All right, but this is why. Okay.
Red card.
Listen, I want to be very clear. I am not a U.S. soccer apologist. I'm not trying to say anybody's caught up with anybody. But Robert, this is what I'm talking about the humility. You know, if you look at the U.S. men's national team roster, a lot of those players, people can say what they want about the U.S. soccer system, and I just think a lot of times a lot of it is bluster if they don't really know like what's going on, because again, there is quality. I bring up FC Dallas. I'm in no way comparing FC Dallas with the Topmost, Ajax's youth academy, right, or FC Barcelona, or any famed other academies. But this is objectively true. FC Dallas has I think they still do. I'm not sure. I have to check this. But for a while they had a partnership with Bayern Munich. And what that means is essentially, right? Bayern's like, hey, listen, we'll partner, and top players from you can go to our clubs or whatever. I could see the chat a little bit, and there are two things I want to dispel because people need to they cannot like this, but two things that really irk me. One, again, when you say the US is shit, I get it. You're comparing it to
I have to object. I didn't say that word.
No. I know, but people, this idea, American soccer is shit, the academies suck, the players suck, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, listen, y'all, and it's funny, I think a lot of people who say that let me not go there. There are players that are being exported from the U.S. that are going into top clubs. They are. It's just a fact. You can look it up. You don't have to take my word.
No, I'm sure that is. But half the U.S. men's national team plays in Europe, if not more than half.
Are they starters? Are they key players for their teams, or are they just on the roster?
That's the question.
No, but the point is this. People need to be honest about something. if the U.S. was so shit at soccer as people like to claim or whatever, and there's absolutely no good happening in terms of the level of coaching and some of the I give credit to the players. Forget about the coaches. Just credit to the players because there are players everywhere. That's my big thing. There are players everywhere. These players are being taken. The ones who go over are being taken at like 16, 17. So a lot of them, some of them. Now, do they all make it? Of course not, because it's hard. But my point is this: it's obviously there's enough talent here that there are European scouts from all the top clubs, and I mean it, all of them, you name them, who are watching U.S. soccer tournaments. People need to be honest about that. If you don't know that that's happening, it's happening. The latest example is Kevin Sullivan for Philadelphia Union, right? I don't know if people know this, but if you look him up, Kevin Sullivan, I believe that's his first name. I think he's like 15, he's not 16 or 17. I think he's like 15 years old, signed with Man City, right? Now, he's not going to walk into Man City's first team. My point is just that a club the size and with the ambitions of Man City, their recent success, is looking at a U.S. product. Like this is not somebody who's like grown up in Brazil. He's been playing in the U.S. He's been playing with an MLS club. So he's obviously good enough. And here's the other thing, and I've experienced this. This is real. European teams in the teenage years, their U17s, U19s, whatever, any European clubs, they send teams to tournaments in the States and in other parts of the world where MLS academies are represented. MLS teams do very well. They do well against these teams. So what's the point there?
Are these youth teams?
Yes, they're comparable though. They're comparable in age. So like I'll give you an example. I was in Portugal this spring. Sporting Portugal's what is it? I think they're U16s or U17s. Went to MLS Next Fest or whatever they call it now, like an MLS run tournament. But it attracts clubs from all around the world, right? These teams go there. Man United, all these the who's who of world football is there. They're youth teams. The European teams aren't walking that. They're not walking it. American teams often do well. What's the point? The point is the talent's there. How the talent gets filtered and processed and where it ends up is a whole nother issue. And again, we can have that discussion. But this is going back to coming full circle. My point is, again, when I watch the U.S. play Brazil and looking at the states of those programs, no, I'm not saying the U.S. is caught up to Brazil in terms of talent level and all that. It's far from it. But my point is this: to win, they don't have to because they just proved it. It's a young, up-and-coming U.S. team, and they could have won that game, probably should have won that game against Brazil. And people can say what they want. Oh, no, it's a warm-up. It doesn't matter. Well, look at Brazil's results. Look at how they played against Costa Rica. Probably they should have been given a penalty. Probably should have won that game. But still, this is football. So this whole U.S. The first thing we got to stop is, the U.S. is shit. There's no football here. No, I agree with you, Robert. It's suppressed. But just because it's suppressed doesn't mean there aren't really talented individuals here.
Oh, sorry, that was just one. So go.
Well, no, yeah. Sorry, no. Ask your question. Sorry, the second thing was just something else. It's about. Let me go real quick. The second thing is this whole thing about being fit. So somebody mentioned players are. The game today is just about physique and athleticism, and there are no smart footballers, right? People make this point today it's just an athlete's game, and I think that's such a BS argument, because are you really trying to tell me that players of yesteryear didn't also thrive in part because of their physical makeup? We've all here raved about Pelé. And I think, Robert, this came out of your mouth about how strong Pelé was, right? And his ability. I use the example of Ronaldo, right? Brazilian Ronaldo. One of Brazilian Ronaldo's greatest assets was that he's kind of a tank. And he combined being physically the strength, the speed, with the ability to manipulate the ball in that way. People need to stop with this it's just athleticism now. It's not. It's never. No.
But
you have to still be a footballer.
I don't think that Daniel or Jared or I am saying that. I could be wrong, but I don't think that any of us are talking about, at least me. I mean, only speaking for myself, I would say that the ball skills, which is crucial, the ball skills is the only equivalent in my mind is basketball. So in terms of ball skills, you talk about an Isaiah Thomas, or somebody like that who has
To modernize, we can go with Kyrie.
or although I'd rather go with Isaiah, but that's another story. But I mean, Isaiah's more my kind of folks. But Kyrie's cool. I like Kyrie. Don't get me
It's
wrong.
2024. I'm just saying, there might be some youngins in the.
I hear you.
Yeah,
I thought I was very happy that Kyrie got to the finals again. To tell you the truth, I was glad. I was glad that he got there. But it's that kind of and I think that's what Americans don't appreciate. Like the other day, I just happened to stumble on a clip from Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan was criticizing the sport. I think this was in anticipation of the Copa America or something. He was criticizing the sport and said, "There's no athletic talent there. I mean, it's like there's nothing. They're doing nothing that requires any talent. There's no physical anything to that sport, And I'm thinking, dude, I mean, you can't, they're not even worth responding to, But
everything went wrong when you started with I was listening to Joe Rogan.
He stumbled upon
everything.
But
already,
all of us like stumble on clips. We all stumble on clips. Like the other day, speaking of Joe Rogan, I stumbled on a clip with the brother. What's the name of the actor that's in the
Terrence Howard.
Terrence Howard. I mean, it's like holy Moses,
he went to Uganda talking about he discovered new math.
Yes, and then he followed up with that other brother that is supposedly friends with him and is saying the same thing. Graham Carter, some I can't remember whatever his name is. He's doing these are
discovered a new math. I'm like, if you don't get out of my country with that shit.
Daniel, what were you going to say, Daniel?
Okay, so I was going to say, firstly, I think when we talk about culture in America, it's a set of colonial state. So what is American culture is often just borrowed from other places. So when we talk about American football culture, it really just comes from the immigrant Nigerians, Ghanaians, people from Mexico, Latin America who come here, and because their parents or them watched football, they are now into football, and they're trying to create some sort of Frankenstein monster or football culture. Then they used the American national team as their vehicle to get that done. Is it successful? Is it building? In some ways, sure. But I would never say that like America has an ingrained football culture. The same with Canada. Australia is a bit different because they're just kind of weird down there. But when you look at most settler colonial states, like when you think about their, at least the European dominated ones, what is football culture in America? Like, what is that meant to be? I don't know. The other thing was, and I might have lost it because I went down a rabbit hole on that one thought. Sorry. I lost it. It'll come back.
It's all good. It's all good.
It should be. I'm only 33. Like, this shouldn't be happening as often as it does.
Well, just to make sure we get to this before we close, and I'm not rushing us, though it is, I'm assuming we're going to get there shortly. Matanda, you sent this, and
I remember.
I'm not going to go ahead, but since you remember, go ahead, Danny. We can come back.
So
go ahead.
When you guys were talking about youth football, I think it's instructive here in many cases to look at the under 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 World Cups. The team, I think, who's won the most under 18 or under 17 World Cups is Nigeria. So when you look at youth football, a lot of youth football is predicated on the baseline of athleticism. If you're quicker, stronger, faster as a child than the other children, even if that child will eventually, even if your opponent will eventually develop a better technical skill, game understanding over the course of their professional career to where the time they're 20, 21, 22, they can manipulate the ball. Mutanda always talks about your ability to manipulate space. By the time you mature 5-6 years ahead of just that raw athleticism that you might have as a 15, 16-year-old, you can beat that team. But when you're relegated to, I don't quite have that full understanding of space, time, space, game situation, whatever the case may be, the guy that's taller, or the person that's taller, faster, stronger does have an advantage in those ways. So I would caution using youth football results to then have some analysis of senior team results, because I do think the age gap between high school age, let's say, and people who graduated college is a completely different game. So there are arguments to say, if not, Nigerians would tell you, if only we just used local players and we just had local coaches, we could just basically copy and paste the football that we play at under 17, and Nigeria should be at least getting to semifinals of the World Cup or quarterfinals of the World Cup or whatever. And it doesn't quite work the same, because you're not playing 17-year-old people from Spain, from Argentina. You're playing their professional teams, and those guys have been coached, trained, to where it's not just a battle of athleticism necessarily, but it's athleticism plus the technical skills, which I think in many African, even in the United States, to be fair, the technical abilities are lacking behind the European ones, which is sad to say.
Well, you raising it, that point is I'm glad you raised that point, and I think that's where a big source of misunderstanding comes from people, to be perfectly honest with you, because I think they conflate things that don't reflect how the game is played. And I don't mean like from a systems tactical. I mean like from the experience of a player. Every player is going through the same process, right? Doesn't matter if you're in Brazil, the US, on the continent of Africa. Like, you're communicating with your environment. You're making a decision, right, in terms of where to be, how to stand, et cetera, and then you're executing that decision. And then so that last piece, the execution, is touching the ball. But those first two things, the communicating, right, so the looking and identifying, and then the deciding, like, those are soft skills that are so important to playing the game. And the thing is, they go in conjunction with the ball manipulation, right? So, and my point with when I talk about like people being not just disingenuous, but inaccurate in terms of saying like, oh, the game today is just about athletics and this and that, as if athleticism and always has been there, is this is what confuses people when they look at players, right? And they try to compare and they say, oh, this player only survives because of their physical prowess, their speed, skill, and this player does it with their brain. I'm sorry, but they're all linked. And to be perfectly honest with you, I think on this panel we can all agree that's largely been a ploy from a certain section of the world to convince us of our inferiority, right? Like, oh, y'all are just brutes. Y'all don't think the game, right? We play with our minds. We do this. It's like, no, it's all connected. And again, the examples are everywhere. We don't have to talk in theory, right? My physical stature matters when I play football, especially if I'm a young kid. And the big mythology that people have as it relates to youth football in the States is, and I talked to American parents about this a few times, right? Because this is an excuse for them, right? They'll be like, oh, yeah, in this country, we don't value smaller players. We want bigger, stronger, faster, right? As if, it's not saying that some people that isn't true in some situations, but what they're saying is, oh, see, in other football cultures, in Europe, wherever, South America, they value like more intelligent players and smaller players. But here's the reality. If you go anywhere in the world and any top academy and you talk to coaches, they're very open and honest. And you don't even have to talk to them. You can just watch the training session and see. If two players are equal or close, typically it's the larger kid who gets chosen. This is true in all the clubs.
You mean in the United States?
Anywhere.
No,
he's talking anywhere.
I'm talking anywhere.
Oh.
Bigger, stronger, faster matters. It does. It just does. I'm not saying that bigger, stronger, faster is always going to win. And to be honest, that's one of the reasons I love a certain type of football. And that's one of the reasons I fell in love with the Barcelona team, for example. At that stage, the driving force of that team were I'll say maybe even 4 players who were 5'6", 5'7". Beautiful. For a shorter guy, I was like, this is lovely. Now, that's not the only example. My point is, though, to be a smaller player and thrive in football, you have to be so good. You have to be so good. And you have to be so good because speed matters, physicality matters, right? But, like, that's not it. right? N'Golo Kante, and I think I saw a tweet that you put out, Daniel, and I couldn't agree with you more. Like, N'Golo Kante doesn't get the credit he deserves because people look at N'Golo Kante and because of the color of his skin, and they say, oh yeah, he's fast and he covers a lot of ground. He's such an amazing footballer. I think Cesc Fabregas said it too, right? Not that we need like necessarily a European to recognize. I certainly don't to recognize Kante, but Cesc Fabregas had a quote where he talked about one of the things that people don't mention when they talk about Kante is he rarely loses the ball, and it's true. Kante will cover ground, he'll win a tackle, but then what he does next is brilliant. He won't just kick it; he might even evade a tackle, dribble, and then he'll make a pass.
Yeah,
he's a brilliant footballer.
He's my favorite European footballer.
Yeah.
Another paradox.
It's disingenuous. It's disingenuous for people, and I'll end here and I'll pass it over. It's disingenuous for people to act like physicality doesn't matter in football, and that like, oh, today people aren't using their brains; they're just physical brutes. It's not. That's not the case. It's never been the case. Because again, and I use the example of back in the day of Pelé and these other players. A lot of times they did well in part because of their physicality. Well, what would Thierry Henry be? Thierry Henry, amazing footballer. What would he be without his pace? He's like an Olympic level sprinter at one point in terms of pace. But obviously, but without his football IQ, he'd be Usain Bolt, right? Oh, I can run. Remember Usain Bolt had a trial with Man United? Didn't go so well. Why? Because it's not about just sprinting fast. You get what I'm saying? Like, people need to be honest.
Also, I should say, I might have buried the lead with the whole Nigeria have the most under 17 World Cups. There's some age questions that we don't bring up because we're African. But I should say that publicly. You know, some of those dudes might have been 20 or 30. But
that's great.
Just for journalistic integrity, there might be some questions there, but not all the teams and not all the players. But
that's what they say about Little League Baseball here,
right?
That team that.
Oh yeah, he's 15, he's 16. Although who was that one dude that was pitching? That might have been in like 2008, 9.
I mean,
there was one dude that was out there pitching shutouts. He was like, he's going to the major leagues. Just give it 10 years. It was like, oh, he's actually 18. Pitching against 14-year-olds.
But I won't front. Even as a soccer dad, I've been on the sideline and I look at the other team sometimes and I'm like, hold up, son.
Birth certificate.
I'm like,
you get mad Trumpish. Like I think he's from Kenya.
Like,
he's from Kenya.
I don't want to start. Don't
suppress that feeling.
Trumpish thing on me. But I just start wondering, like, hold up. This whole team is
Danny Almonte, thank you. Base proletariat, yes. I wonder where Danny is, man. Shout out to Danny, bro. You was out there killing them kids, bro.
Well, to your point, when you beat up on the kids, it doesn't mean you're going to translate it to being able to play with it anyway. But
look, speaking of girls soccer, I think. Excuse me for using the word soccer, but.
So my fault. I just
I lapsed back into the
my bad
into the gringo mindset. But
this is why we got, is it
football,
yellow? Which is
but I think we should have a session at some point, not exclusively, but primarily focused on the women's game. I think that would be a cool thing to do.
I would prefer. We need a woman panelist though.
That would be nice though. That would be nice to do.
Well, let's I mean, let's do it. And if there are any in the remixing community that want to join us or lead us in that discussion, let's do it.
That would be cool.
But before we go, I do want to just have I had with this Keith Woods account. I don't know who this person is. They have a very popular account.
Anybody who pays for Twitter is already problematic. So
that's a good point. And they are super pressed about how tragic they say it is. Few countries are undergoing population replacement as rapidly as Canada.
It's like a closet out of the closet KKK Twitter feed. I mean, come on.
So that's where they were. That's
They're
the
big,
Canadian
man.
national team.
This is
in
what I'm saying. Like,
2020,
what is an actual Canadian though?
And
Because
that's the Canadian national team today.
They're big, man.
it doesn't mean anything. Like, what is it being? And I was born in
how did
Halifax,
this
to be
team
fair, but
do? How did this team do versus this team?
I know Canada's last World Cup was 1986 before the one in 2021. So they weren't that great.
See, nobody wants to talk about the meritocracy when they're getting outperformed.
Yeah.
No,
It's just
no,
that
and this
simple.
whole and this I went through. If you go through,
I mean, the
this-
meritocracy is a bunch of bullshit anyway. But
but this dude is like was happy.
You added to the
double
ratio.
down.
Don't kill me.
I did. Absolutely, I like that joint. Absolutely, it's saying who cares about the success of a national team if it doesn't represent the nation? He says.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, so
I tell you, man.
when
the
I read that
insidiousness
line-
of whiteness, like what is Canadian actually? Like,
Go off, Jared. Go off. What are you about to say? Go off.
well, my first thought obviously is that look, they genocidally removed the indigenous population, so by natural right, they have every right to claim a complaint about replacement of populations. He's earned the right, Daniel. Let's be fair to this white man and his colonialism.
this is a sarcastic comment for the people listening.
But it's also right. But it's also. But honestly, the first thought I had was you're right. These nation states are absolutely like racial, colonial. They are by definition. So that's what I'm saying about the American fans when I held up those pictures a few minutes ago.
Yeah,
They're not.
sure.
This is not. I'm happy to be an American. This is
absolute. This is
It's the Malcolm X thing when the
state.
yeah. So I'm like, you're
Absolutely.
right. That African group doesn't represent you, and I would love it if I know it's unrealistic, but I would love it if they said, you know what, you're right, and we're walking off, and go, and that's it. You don't want us on your team. We don't represent you. Word. I'll be over here in the park playing, and if you want to donate $10 to come see us play in the park to supplement what we're losing from all the damage this is going to do to our careers, come on through. I will fly to Canada and pay $100 per ticket, whatever it is, to watch them play, and to say, then put your team out there. Then go back, get your all white team, and see how you do in the Copa. And if you make it to the World Cup when you're not hosting it, when you're not one of the host nations, and then you know what I'm saying, enjoy yourself in 2026. Go get your white folks and play. But in the sense that that's how I was like, I think that most feel that way. And again, I said when it comes to the Americans, I know the I have no science for this, but the dynamic with Latin America is that since there aren't the amount of black players isn't there here, is that they would rather win with they would rather lose with Jose and Hernandez and Sanchez and whoever on the team. If they would rather lose than win with that squad. If they can't have Pulisic leading the squad, if they can't have whoever they're, even Reina, I'm like, they probably looking at him like, nah, that's too much. He got too much brown in there.
No,
like
I think you're right. Jared's right.
Like
man.
that's so yeah. So when I saw, I was just like, you know what, man, you're right. And but that's it. That was it. That was
the worst part. Well, not the worst part. The most annoying part to me is the better way to phrase it. Is when I look at the Canadian team now, I see capture. So they look at it and see, I don't see myself being represented by the nation. I look at it and I see Africans shouldn't be representing your country in the first place because it's representative of the 5-6 centuries of capitalism, imperialism, colonialization. That if your mind was actually attuned correctly to, if you wanted to do racism correctly, you would say, we captured you, we took your shit, and now you're playing for us. Deal with it.
You wanted to do racism correctly.
But they don't. They want to see
They're not even
whiteness.
racism
They're
incorrectly.
doing this wrong.
Exactly. Like they want whiteness so badly that they don't understand that because whiteness exists in the way that it does, Africans are now playing and serving you. It's a continuation of the imperial project, but they don't see it that way because they want whiteness so badly, which is the insidiousness of it.
But it gets even worse because at least
Oh man, we're ending on a depressing note. If it gets worse,
theoretically, what Daniel's saying is absolutely correct. But the gloss that is there implicitly is that white mediocrity should be better than black excellence. That's the gloss, right? The mediocrity of whites trumps black excellence, right? Excellence, at least theoretically, was a universal principle until blacks became excellent. It was a universal. It was a standard that we all had to meet. But all of a sudden, when blacks start meeting that standard of excellence to the detriment of whites, the whites are now slipping down the scale toward mediocrity. All hell breaks loose. All hell breaks loose.
Also,
go ahead. Go ahead, Dan.
No, I'll just like we were talking about Brazil. One thing I always look at is if you go to Wikipedia Brazilian heads of state and you scroll all through that bitch. Sorry for using gender language. If you scroll all through it, white, European will be more accurate. There's been no black, even there's but one, the woman whose name is Rousseff. Maybe she looks a bit,
Dilma.
But it's all white dudes. But then when you look at the national team, it's African people. They would call Pele king, that like Garinch, like you can go all through everything.
Now there's a rub here, Daniel, that you should know about, which is who was Bolsonaro's vice president?
Was it an African?
In the United States, he's a blood. But in Brazil,
that was mad 1960s, but okay.
He's doing his thing, and he is obviously on the far right of the spectrum. There are a lot of
Hamilton Moreau.
We ain't got no chance on that one.
I don't know.
Milton Moreau. As a matter of fact, during the
this is dude you said is a blood.
That's who he said is. I don't know about that. I don't know. I don't know.
My mixed race radar isn't hitting on this dude.
You know what I'm saying? My mixed radar is not going on. So don't throw him on us like that, Robert. Like he's so.
But to Robert's point, he's not European. He looks like he has some native,
indigenous,
mestizo. Is that the word y'all use for those?
Yeah, that's not a word that we use down here very much.
Okay,
but, but he's in the United States. He would be black. Okay.
Damn.
And
I don't think so.
In the United States, he would be one of those white people that they don't consider white.
No, the chat already has the answer. In the United, where did it go? In the chat,
that's a Mexican.
No, in the chat, that's a Mexican. That's what I was looking for. Yeah. In the United States, that's a Mexican.
He's not being. Jared, put his picture back up, Jared. Put his picture back up.
Maybe if he's in New York, they might say Puerto Rican.
Yeah.
Back up.
Yeah. Just to
bro, there's no way anyone is looking at him like, yeah, that's a blood.
Well, I mean,
not here.
Like that Mexican man, and he'd be like Brazilian. They'd be like, I don't have time for all that.
There are a lot of people in the United States that look like that who are members of Jack and Jill.
Yeah,
that's all I got to say.
But on first, listen. Hey,
but don't put that. Yeah.
I should also comment that we had an intellectual for president about 25 years ago named Fernando Henrique Cardoso. And there's a very crude but necessarily, telling phrase that you can say in Portuguese, which is ele tem pé na cozinha. which means he has a foot in the kitchen. And that's a bit of a euphemism for saying that the guy's part black, And when Fernando Henrique was president, he actually came out publicly and said that, he's got, roots in black culture, black racial culture. But
he's got a foot in the kitchen.
God
Yeah.
damn. Brazil is racist as fuck. All the way to the right. Every bit of it is just
listen. I mean, you have no idea.
Poetic racism.
you have the racism in Brazil is probably the most sophisticated and thoroughly destructive racism on the planet. Because you have got people here who, in terms of the official number of blacks in Brazil, is 55% of a population of roughly 220 million. That's the official number, right?
The unofficial, though.
If you think about people that, by the U.S. definition of, the one drop rule, probably talking at a minimum 2/3, if not 3/4 of the population. And they have been excluded from literally everything. Politically, economically, the only two areas where you see blacks in some kind of numbers is in music / entertainment and sports.
Gotcha.
And in those particular sectors, they control nothing. They own nothing. They are commodities.
This is what I'm saying. It's
doctors, lawyers, that whole forget about it.
It's the same pattern no matter where you look.
Including
Go for it, Matanda.
No, I'm sorry.
Well, go ahead, Matanda.
No, I was just gonna say they control in what you just said there about the black people's prominence in entertainment and in football spaces in Brazil as the laborers, right? But like they don't control anything, and including to a large extent conversations about what is ailing the Seleção, for example, like what's ailing the national team and what Brazil can do to return. Because what's interesting is even those conversations, I'm not gonna say they're hijacked, because I mean they're being had by Brazilians, but it's really interesting to see, and this is why this book is fascinating. Like would we ever be given an accurate assessment of what is ailing Brazilian football if we're not going to the streets and talking to like people who look like us about their experiences? I don't think we would. Now, man, maybe I'm not in the right spaces, but I'm yearning for that because it's fascinating to me. But and this is related to what Jared put out with the Canadian, like this whole idea of what constitutes a nation and who represents and who did that. Like, yes, with this example with Canada, my man I had the exact same response, Jared. That's why I was laughing while you were saying that, because I was also like, hey, yeah, my man, you're absolutely right. Like, first of all, it's wild that you're saying this while they're still digging up indigenous graves in Canada
at the Catholic schools.
Yeah,
or
it's still they continue to do that while you're talking about replacement. But go ahead, go off. But then also, do you put out the team that you want to put out, right? And then because what we get is this myth of meritocracy that people say is, oh no, we don't want DEI hires, right? And it's not because I don't like black people. It's just you're less qualified or this and that. This Canadian national team now with Alphonso Davies, by the way, he's as much of an MLS product as anything, by the way. Let me just throw that out there. Look at where he was before he went to Bayern Munich.
Vancouver.
And Edmonton before that. He went to Vancouver Whitecaps when he was like 16. But anyway, who do you want to put out? And I think when it comes to Brazil, this is my great angst, and I wish I want to go and visit, because I really am fascinated by it in the sense of like I feel like I have an idea of what's going on, but there's no way for me to know like objectively without being in it. But reading it, watching the team over several years, it's like their identity, again, I'll use the word schizophrenic, it's almost like they're struggling so hard to like be like with just they struggle with this anti-blackness. Their players struggle with it. There's this pressure. Like if anything, that's what burdens them. Like, yo, how do I perform as I can only imagine what it's like as a black player in Brazil. Like I have no like I mean think about the players who don't even get look at Vinny Jr. and how I don't think people like the guy has a tough life. I'm not gonna lie. It's rough. And now think about all the players coming up with who are never gonna reach that level and who obviously aren't gonna become coaches in Brazil. They're obviously not gonna manage a team or a club. Like it's wild. So who's telling the story here is what's fascinating to me about Brazil.
So,
and what they want to be.
So can we I do have to wrap here. So can we use that as one of two at least teasers for whenever we gather next, one of which is the women's soccer, women's football, women and so we have to reach out to potential colleagues and co-hosts for that. And then this discussion, again, building off of national culture, identity, race, and Robert's invitation to the three of us to Brazil. So, which is all I keep hearing in all of this is some implicit, tacit, you all need to gather and come hang out in Brazil.
Don't forget that the book that Mutanda just showed us is, at least theoretically, is the foundation for that 4-part documentary series that I passed the links to you guys like months ago. So it's in the WhatsApp chat.
So let's get the book. We'll read the book. We'll schedule around that book. And what's the next major women's football tournament? Do we want to schedule something around that? Is there something we could start to target?
I mean, do we want to reach out to the one homie first that wrote that one article?
That's right. That's right. We got.
So we got two shows. Got
a couple shows. Okay, yeah, that's great. The more the better.
Brazil's going to be
the Olympics. The Olympics are coming up, and that's always fascinating because the
when
Olympics is that?
Be good. August.
That's next month.
Yeah,
I think
this summer. Damn.
Yeah, Paris.
In Paris.
I guess the other thing we could do is we could get together 2 or 3 weeks from now when the Copa America and the Euros is over.
I like that.
Yeah.
The more the better for me. So let's do it.
I'm sending vibes to the Brazilian national team to get their ish.
Yeah, that'd be nice. I'd like to see that too.
I do not want. I'm on record saying this. I don't care. Everybody knows how I feel about Leo Messi, the footballer, and all that. That's you could separate these things. At least I try to in my mind. I do not want Argentina winning the Copas. So
they got Wolverine.
It's not Brazil. It's gonna be. I want it to be somebody else. I'm not saying it has to be Brazil, but just please, Brazil.
Yeah,
I hear you. Get out, rise.
It can't be the U.S. either.
No, man, that would be like
the U.S. Then I look like a genius, right? But I would be insufferable if it was the U.S. I'd be like, what I tell you. But, anyway.
But that's not my reason. That would be the least of my reasons for wanting that not to happen.
I hear you. I know. I hear you.
All right. So 3 weeks we'll be live from Robert's living room. All right, everybody. Peace. If you're willing to fight for it, like Fred Hampton used to say, all of my colleagues' information is in the show description. Thanks, everybody who saw this live and those who will see this later. Peace to you as well. Fellas, I always really do appreciate this. Thank you all very much. And we'll reconvene at another time right here at
I mix what I like.
What do you sacrifice? Calm. Kindness, kinship, love. I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space. I share my dreams with ghosts. I wake up every day to an equation I wrote 15 years ago for which there's only one conclusion. I'm damned for what I do. My anger anger, my ego, my unwillingness to yield, my eagerness to fight, that set me on a path from which there's no escape. I yearn to be a savior against injustice without contemplating the cost, and by the time I look down, there's no longer any ground beneath my feet. What is my sacrifice? I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. Now, the ego that started this fight will never have a mirror or an audience or the light of gratitude. So what do I sacrifice? Everything.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.